The modern city was surrounded by the darkness of the night. In one of the houses the light was on, where the room was in disarray. In the center of it stood a man, looking at his wallet, saying that he had finally saved up enough money. Bending toward the light, Akina Shoji, a corporate servant, could now quit his job and open a business, bidding farewell to his office, while being glad that he had not offended his boss even after working overtime for days. The hero put off his salary for months in order to open a store, which the hero was encouraged to do by a magazine. The young man's free life without company began at this very moment, when suddenly his consciousness became clouded. He noticed that again he had not slept all night. This feeling was usual for him. It was before fainting, which shortened his life a little. Losing consciousness, the guy was happy, intending to continue working upon awakening. Sometime later, the hero was awakened by the cry of the crowned person. Akina woke up in an unknown palace, lying on the floor in the middle of a magic circle. 4 people looked down on him, several soldiers in plate armor and magicians. He assumed that he had fallen into a dream, but King Rui assured him from the throne that it was not he who had fallen into another world, from which Shoji concluded that the dream was about being summoned to another world. The hero introduced himself to the king when he told the story of their country's struggle with demons and the worsening situation. But they managed to summon a hero, whose strength they immediately asked to borrow. But the man, noticing the banality of the dream, said he had no strength. Rui told him that heroes receive abilities from God, and said the phrase that unlocked them. Akina, nervously waiting, uttered the cherished phrase, when suddenly a statistics window appeared in front of him. The hero was surprised by the window that contained his name, gender, age, and also his special ability. It was the cultivation skill. The hero, having revealed the information about the skill, realized that he could grow anything planted in the ground and do it quickly. The king was impatiently interested in the power bestowed by the god. When the boy told about the skill, the ruler and his retinue were disappointed, offering to get rid of it, or use it to buy time to summon a new hero. The king called for silence, noting that they were supposed to use him for food. Only the hero raised a finger at this suggestion. Rui ordered the skills to be used to create food for the country, and gave Shoji a field on the edge of the capital. But Shoji just wanted to wake up and create an enterprise. Sometime later, standing in the field, the hero was bored, because with the king's permission, he had been living there for a week, during which he could not get out of his sleep. He tried to grow vegetables using his skill while he still had hopes of its usefulness. He found that he could grow plants in a few days, but his skill could only do that, and he quickly became bored. On the 8th day, he wondered if he might not be dreaming and decided to meet the king. Sometime later, the man appeared before the ruler, telling him about his affairs. After thanking Rui, he showed the vegetables he had grown with his skill, surprising the king and his entourage. After which the king, wanting to solve the problem of hunger in the country, wanted to buy the entire harvest from him. Seeing the king's good mood, Akina asked how long he would stay in this world, assuming that until the summoning of a new hero. Before the king could understand what he was talking about, the boy explained that he had hoped to go home when another king took over. But in response, shocking the guy, came the bitter truth. It was impossible to go back. A little later, the hero got drunk on alcohol and raged, cursing the king because he was summoned without his consent. In the end, he became an ordinary farmer, despite the fact that he endured the work, saved money, and did not even inherit his parents' house. Having calmed down, he reasoned that he did not want to repeat their failure, remembering the past. His parents were farmers and had no time for their son, working in the fields. He had his own entertainment, but one day it all ended. His father, worried about the future, attended a seminar, which was a trap for scammers. The boy's parents worked overtime to pay off the debt they had taken on, and the boy's father soon died. His father's death insurance covered his debts, but as soon as Shoji came of age, his mother also passed away. The young man abandoned his farming destiny and became an employee, wanting to find his own way. Despite many years of work in the office, he strove for a comfortable life and opening a high-profile enterprise. He studied, saved money, and finally reached the end. But, realizing that he couldn't open an account in another world, Akina finished the last bottle. At that moment, the idea of making more drinks came into his head. Deciding that this was a great idea, he went to the field where he buried the bottle, hoping that the beer tree would grow quickly. The next second, he passed out right in the field, and when the morning came, Shoji woke up with a hangover. Remembering that he had spent all the money, he looked up and noticed a tree with bottles on its branches. Surprised, noticing the number of bottles, he remembered that he had only planted one. But he realized that he had used the cultivation skill then. Doubting what he had seen, and thinking about this world, he decided to try the liquor from the tree. Having uncorked the bottle, the hero poured the drink into a glass and, having tasted it, noticed that the alcohol was good. Having grown his own booze, Akina headed to a bar in the kingdom's commercial district. He offered to buy all the liquor from him. The merchant, noting the number of bottles, assumed that they were stolen, but the young man assured that it was a gift. Having convinced himself, the seller tried one bottle, planning to buy it if he was satisfied with the quality. After tasting the alcohol, he offered a price of 8 silver coins for the entire product, which was a good deal since the skills products were of good quality. Having completed the deal, the hero inquired about the method of making his own product, which, according to him, was a gift. When the seller said that the brewing method could be learned at the brewery, the guy was convinced that there was a normal way of brewing alcohol in this world. Akina also inquired about the skills, learning that there were other people who possessed them. The man's assumption that there were skills for farming was not justified. The merchant said that those who had fighting skills earned good money. Realizing that in the eyes of the people his farming skills were of little importance, the young man decided that this was to his advantage. Leaving the bar, the hero was going to buy some well-selling items, and after a while he was already standing in front of a garden of many objects. Shields, swords, potions, and more grew out of the ground. Everything was grown through experiments where he grew everything he could get his hands on, trying to learn his skill better. Also taking care of safety, the man built a fence around his plot. Looking at the grown items, Akina noted that his skill was amazing because he could grow anything. If the item had no seeds, he simply buried it like a potato, which proved that he was unbalanced. As for ordinary fruits, they grew overnight, making one doubt the benefit of other activities. The guy's trump card was a plant with coins at the ends of its branches. He could grow artificial money. Akina knew that the king and his retinue would soon learn of this incredible skill. Because of this, he thought about improving the fence and finding another patron. Having learned the full value of the skill, the ruler would have forced Shoji to work as a servant, and he would not repeat the fate of his parents, and decided to use the received power only for himself. The guy was debating whether he should go underground, or create an independent enterprise, something he aspired to, and live a carefree life. With the power of the skill, he could do it, and decided to become a wandering merchant, starting to prepare with the skill. Akina paid the entrance fee to the merchant guild, bought a new cart, and sold the harvest for startup capital. Sometime later, all the preparations were completed. The hero recalled how in the past he worked beyond his means, and having saved up money, he irrevocably ended up in another world. When he was about to set off on his journey, he was firmly convinced that he would create his own business. Now no one could use him, and he was going to do the best he could, intending to live as he wished. Sometime later, the guy, ready to leave, decided to hire an escort for himself, due to the risk of meeting with bandits. At the same time, he wanted to hire a beautiful woman to defeat the enemy beautifully with a beautiful weapon. He had hoped so. But in front of the hero, a girl lay on the ground, whining because, while doing simple escort work, she had broken her weapon again. The young man noticed that there was something strange about the girl he hired and thought it was part of the business. In front of Shoji, a girl was sitting on the ground, crying over a broken weapon. The guy, remembering what exactly happened, started with his meeting with this weapon killer. Previously, he was waiting for an escort after he finished his preparations. The next second, he was greeted by the adventurers from the guild. They gave off a trustworthy appearance, something Shoji noticed when introducing himself to the group of adventurers. They were the warrior Kyle, the archer Kava, and the last one, with silky hair, was a beautiful girl, which the main character could not help but notice. But he also noticed that, despite her beauty, the girl was holding a huge steel rod in her hand. The girl introduced herself and said that she hits her enemies with this metal rod, to which Akina suggested that it was a great way to fight, thinking that you can't judge a book by its cover. The girl's comrades urged her not to break the weapon and not to pull them down again, which caused doubts in the hero. He couldn't believe that this solid metal pond could be broken. He assumed that she had broken her original weapon. Sometime after they had met, the group set out on a journey with a cart, which rattled along the path. After some time, the hero became very bored and wanted to talk to someone. He asked the team how long they had been connected to each other, but they denied their relationship with the gun killer. Noticing that Mine reacted a little excitedly to this, he couldn't help but wonder how this girl got this name. The warrior was about to start a short story about it when they were interrupted by a loud shout. With loud shouts, a group of bandits surrounded the adventurers, demanding money and the girl. Bandits from the Bloody Idiots gang attacked the group, but they did not despair and were going to stop them. The archer, taking the lead, told Shoji to hide in the cart, while giving commands to the other warriors. Having locked himself inside the carriage, the young man watched what was happening through a small window. The wagon was created as a small shelter where the hero could safely worry about the outcome of the battle, but still want to see the strength of his companions. The archer began to fire at the enemies en masse, declaring the foes to be his future reward for the quest. Even a newbie like Shoji could see how strong he was. Not far from this, the team's spearman was operating, cutting down enemies left and right, proving his strength to his employer. Noticing that there were only 2 people participating in the battle, Shoji turned his attention to the girl who was ordered to join the fight. Mine ran towards the enemy with a staff in her hands, while the young man was puzzled as to how she was going to fight. Looking at her movement, he doubted that she was really an adventurer, and, the next moment, the girl, with her eyes closed in fear, hit the robber in the stomach. While he was mocking the girl, a huge force pierced him from the end of the staff and sent him far up, to the surprise of the attackers and the guy sitting in the cart. After one of their comrades landed on the ground after a long fall, the remaining bandits retreated, fearing this outcome. Shoji couldn't help but notice that the girl was strong, but then he noticed how she fell to the ground in front of the broken iron bar with tears in her eyes. The hero was puzzled how the thick metal rod was broken so easily, and wondered what kind of force was needed to do this. This is what the end of the warrior's story led to. The girl had enormous strength, which is why she broke any weapon every time. The nickname of the weapon killer appeared to her precisely because of this. A little later, the girl ran, humming to herself with a new mithril sword in her hands, which she received after defeating the bandits. Her companions urged her to sell the sword before she broke it, because it cost about 200 gold coins. Having learned this, the hero was sure that he could make a good profit from selling the swords if he grew them. But the girl refused to sell the new sword, assuring the others that she would never sell it or break it. Then the archer called on the others to speed up their pace in order to arrive at the city as soon as possible, because despite all the problems they were already approaching. Sometime later, the merchant's company and his entourage entered the city, driving through narrow corridors. The heroes saw for the first time a trading city in another world, on the streets of which everyone was busy with their own affairs, expecting to create their first enterprise here. A little later, in front of the tavern, Akina called on his mercenaries to rest, because the next day he would trade, believing that the city was safe. This proposal caused some concern among the warriors, but the guy immediately assured them that he would pay them the entire amount. This immediately earned the adventurers' respect. Right after that, everyone went their separate ways. Kaba was resting in the tavern, and Kyle, chasing girls, was also in the tavern until the hero could get used to the norms of this world. But the girl decided to stay with the guy, timidly calling him with some request when everyone said goodbye. A little later, out of breath, she was holding 5 huge boxes in her hands, which she easily carried. The girl helped Shoji carry the heavy boxes, explaining that it was no problem. He talked to the merchant guild and decided to open a shop in the city market. And he couldn't leave Mine at the inn, because she wanted to be a saleswoman and carry goods for an extra fee, using her incredible strength. A little later, sitting under the canopy, Akina and Main laid out all the goods, when suddenly the girl noticed, among everything else, a beautiful fabric. Drawing Shoji's attention to this, he wondered how it was sewn. It was a cloth from a type of handkerchief that the hero had left after coming to this world. He gave one of these to a girl, for which she sincerely thanked him, smiling from ear to ear. But the hero knew that it was just a thing that he had bought some time ago. Having summed up the results and put all the goods on the counter, he was ready to sell, but being excited, having grown too much goods, he went beyond all limits. The girl couldn't believe the quantity and variety of goods until the hero noticed that the bustling market was mostly made up of middle-class customers. The hero arranged the items in a special order, with food items in front and expensive items in the back. After all, if there was a theft, Shoji would rather steal cheap food than expensive items. Sometime later, when people began to gather, Akina Main loudly announced that his first business, a traveling store, was open, and called out to passers-by. Most of those who came were men who came at Mine's call, which could not but please the hero, because the chances of selling the huge stock of things became higher. Earlier, at the Akina Trade Market, Shoji announced the opening of his mobile shop to sell skill-grown goods. The goods included food, liquor, and even clothing, which surprised the buyers. But the hero thought the amount of goods was too large. During the trading process, customers bought food for the proposed price of 2 gold coins, which surprised everyone, to which the hero was a little surprised, because he was comparing the value of coins from 2 worlds, where vegetables cost about 200 yen. But the boy forgot that there was a shortage of food in the kingdom and raised his price by 8 copper coins, which was a cheap price among the entire market. The next item people were interested in was dried meat. It was sold for 30 copper coins. The customers were stunned because, according to them, the meat was cheaper than in Zappa's store, which was considered a good deal. After hearing the prices, customers bought up the entire product by the caseful. Soon the meat and vegetables were sold out, and customers continued to buy up the remaining goods. Sometime later, the hero sighed wearily, still surprised at how quickly the goods were bought up. The next moment, a second wave of housewives arrived. Akina immediately explained that the food had been sold out, but only the clothes remained. Although it was second-hand, it was still of good quality and cost 3 gold coins. The price once again surprised the residents. On the ground, you could buy some decent clothes for 2,000 yen, so the boy thought that 3 gold coins was a good price for this market. A second later, the girls ran away, asking for a minute, leaving Shoji and Mine in a stupor. And the next moment, they were buying all the goods with bags of money without a trace. Having bought clothes from a second-hand store just once, Akina used them and acquired a large supply. But all the food items went on sale quickly, although there were a lot of used clothes left, selling box after box of clothes to women. At one point, the hero was about to open another one, but turning around, he saw that the boxes were empty. Realizing that the goods were completely sold out, the hero immediately announced that the goods for today were sold, to the general surprise of the other merchants, because it was still only morning. Having promised that the next time he came there would be more goods, the guy was surprised by the housewife's passion for profitable deals. Sometime later, the girl was delighted with Shoji's success, and the warrior was amazed at his trading skills. Meanwhile, they were already close to the capital, and so far they have not met any bandits on the way back. Having mentioned this, they remembered that they had not yet arrived. Suddenly, another group of bandits attacked with similar intentions to the previous ones. The archers and spearmen were preparing for battle when Mine, drawing her sword, offered to deal with them herself, wanting to show the enemy the power of her weapon. Noting that the girl had changed since the last battle, but her comrades still urged her not to break her weapon. At the bandits' ambush, the heroes regrouped. Shoji hid in the cart and Mine, exclaiming, attacked the enemy and delivered a precise blow. The sword could withstand at least one attack without breaking, which was to be expected from a mithril sword. Saying that she was not finished yet, the girl rushed to attack the remaining opponents and even cut one of their steel club in half. Mine gradually defeated each of the enemies with special diligence. Akina noticed that her movements were different from the past, but there was only one problem, although she could still continue. The next moment, after several attacks, the mithril sword was broken. It could not withstand the girl's strength. Mine would not have noticed this without the hero's mention. Sometime later, after the battle, the girl was exhausted. As the warrior noted, luck was not on her side, but the team never thought that the mithril sword could break, which proved that Mine's strength was abnormal. This sword was once used by a bandit, but in the end, it became just a waste. The girl, without losing hope, searched among the obtained items for other mithril weapons, but as others noticed, even if there were any, she cut them all down. After dealing with all the bandits, the men mocked the girl until she didn't know what to do. Akina noticed the boy's low opinion of Mine and could understand the reason. A little later, in the royal capital, the hero paid for the adventurer's hired labor, and they said goodbye on a good note. The hero, driving on about his business, thought about the girl, believing that she should have found a compromise. Mine's power was amazing, and the boy wondered if he could use his cultivation skill to somehow help her handle her power. But when he came to his senses, he remembered that he should first take care of himself, because he did not know when the kingdom would want to kill him, useless as he was, or make a servant out of him if they suddenly found out the true power of the skill. So Akina decided that he needed to get out of the kingdom as quickly as possible. To that end, he collected some information that the area around the capital was safe enough for the townspeople to do their shopping. But there were bandits outside the city, so he needed a personal guard for safety. Remembering the warrior and archer he had dealt with recently, he knew they would be busy with other work. Akina decided that he would go to the Adventurers Guild when he went out to trade again. The next day, at the guild, the hero saw from the doorway a scene of how Mine was threatened to be made a servant. Stepping onto the threshold of the guild, the hero was surprised by the scene before him when Mine called him, saying that she could not pay the interest on her debts and that was why she was being taken away. Sighing at the problem that had arisen, the young man was irritated and asked how much the repayment cost. The cost was 1 gold coin per month and another 4 silver coins of interest. He could pay, but he knew that it wouldn't solve the root of the problem, and the next thing he did was buy a broken mithril sword for 2 gold coins. Thus, the girl had money left to buy a new weapon, for which she was sincerely grateful. Having received the moneylender left, shouting after him that if Main could not pay next time, he would become a servant. Asking Mine what had happened, Shoji suggested that they tell her more in the cafeteria across the street. A little later, sitting at a table, the girl told me that she had a skill called superhuman. It increased her physical abilities, however, she could not control it, so she broke any weapon. The hero noticed that her skill was much more heroic than the cultivation skill. Unfortunately for the girl, the enhancement did not protect her from pain, so she was afraid to use her bare hands, and some monsters could not be defeated with cheap weapons. So she bought high-quality expensive weapons on credit which grew each time, and each time she broke the weapons. The guy guessed that she was eventually given the nickname Gun Killer. The girl also explained that she tried to join the army, but each time she put her partners in danger and was fired. As a result, she was in danger of becoming a servant since she could not repay the debt. The hero, reasoning about her situation, considered becoming a servant for something like that to be something terrible. But on the ground, he himself was in some way a servant of the company, and his boss did not know what the guy was capable of. However, such a talented girl was also not understood by anyone and could not use all her abilities. A little later, Shoji was dragging a sack along the street of artisans, approaching a building with a sign with swords. Hoping that he had come to the right place, he noticed how steam was coming from the door, burning the boy. Entering the building, Aiken attracted the attention of the blacksmith, who was still at work, so he told his client to wait a minute. The boy was surprised, seeing the gnome race for the first time, and he explained to the blacksmith that he had not seen anyone like him in his hometown. And he heard for the first time about a country where there were no gnomes. And immediately getting down to business, he turned to his client, asking about his wishes. To begin with, the guy put a large bag down and dumped its contents. Dozens of mithril swords on the table, shocking the blacksmith. It was the very same broken sword he had bought from Mine, later grown and multiplied by the skill. The man asked to fix one and used the rest for another weapon. Since he couldn't process the mithril himself, he had no choice but to rely on a professional. He wondered if the dwarf could make something better than the original sword, to which the blacksmith immediately agreed, but set a price of 20 gold coins. Without worrying at all about this amount, he gave away a bag of gold coins in advance. Realizing the guy's trust, the dwarf exchanged introductions with him. The hero talked to Moed, who promised to do everything he could. A little later, the young man was glad that the blacksmith trusted him after everything he had done, showed respect and due reverence for his work. The guy thought that there was no reward or respect on Earth, and people were only worthy of a working relationship with their boss. He knew it would be difficult, but he planned to protect his dignity as a merchant in this world. 10 days later, he returned to the guild, meeting Mine there. After offering a task, the guy suggested moving to his office. The building looked more like a private home, which caused some uncultured thoughts to arise in Mine's head, but he calmed her down and asked about her progress and the weapon that had already been broken. Then he asked the girl if she would like to become his personal security guard on a permanent basis. He was not sure about his safety in the future when he opened a business, so he needed a security guard all the time. In response to the girl's doubts that he would break any weapon, he said that everything was fine with that and pointed to the things under the canvas. Throwing back a piece of cloth, Akina revealed that there were several dozen swords lying there, surprising the girl with the quantity of weapons, as well as their quality. Each of the swords was made of mithril. Mine couldn't understand why expensive mithril weapons were in cheap boxes. The guy only said that she could use his weapon as much as she wanted, even the mithril one, if she became his guard. And he was ready to take on her debt. Arriving in a complete stupor, the girl understood that this was too much. Therefore, Shoji followed with some conditions for work. She was to accompany him at all times while he worked and follow him regardless of the dangers. But even with these conditions, Mine could not believe his offer. Then Akina asked about her salary, which would be 40 gold coins per month, and he would deduct the debt from her salary. Hearing this, she told him that she had a debt of 1,000 gold coins. It was accumulating due to the huge interest. But even though the amount was roughly over 10 million yen, the hero said that he would be able to pay off the debt with the next payment. Despite Mine's surprise at his wealth, Shoji asked her opinion about the proposed job. But the girl still had doubts, because the man even allowed her to break weapons, paid for the work, and his benefit from hiring her was less than the cost of the debt itself. The whole point was that the young man had hopes for her amazing superhuman skill, and the man understood that the girl just didn't have the ability to use it correctly. Taking her hands, he explained that he wanted to give her the opportunity not to ignore the potential of her powers. For this, he was ready to give as many weapons as he could, and one day, even buy a weapon that would not break even if she wanted it to. By giving the girl the choice to work for someone who recognized her value, despite the fact that he now looked like a fraud, the hero calmed any doubts that were arising in Mine. He said that her strength was useful and that there was no need to endure the nickname anymore, promising that it would become a fun memory. Inspired by Mine's capabilities, she declared that she wanted to become his subordinate and no longer worry about her strength. When making the deal, the girl said that she would become the guy's permanent companion and would fight with all her might to protect him. Wiping his tears on the guy's clothes, he thought about how he had acquired a strong escort who would not abandon the one who helped pay off the debt and gave him weapons. He was absolutely sure that he gave her a job in a good company with the best boss in the world. Sometime later, the hero and his partner set out on a journey. He officially hired Mine as his personal guard and decided to visit a neighboring city. During the trip, he noticed that the road had become less safe, but the girl with a huge supply of weapons on her belt was ready for any danger. The girl was glad to have so many weapons. Besides, there were spare swords in the cart. There should be enough of them, even if they all turned out to be broken. The supplies contained swords that had been remade by Maud, as well as other things that had been grown by the hero's skill. Mine, waving her sword, called upon the enemies, saying that she was ready for their attack at any time. The road was not safe, most likely due to bandits, but Akina would have liked not to run into anyone at all. The next second, huge monsters suddenly emerged from the forest, shaking the ground around them. The sight of them alone made the couple tremble with fear. The hero saw monsters for the first time, realizing that there must be monsters in another world. The girl explained that these were forest bears that rarely came out of the forest, but were fierce and stubborn monsters. It was obvious that they had attacked and were chasing people. Akina assumed that it would be difficult to escape from them. But Mine reassured him, because as long as she had a weapon, she could destroy them. That was what the young man was counting on, recognizing her strength. Boldly jumping off the cart, the girl immediately attacked the nearest enemies. Looked at the opponents. While Shoji was waiting for Mine to show her development, she, rushing at high speed straight into the bear's clutches, deftly dodged the attack by going after its back. At this time, the young man looked out of the small window of the carriage and saw that the girl's movements had become much better and were filled with confidence. She cut off one of the bear's limbs, rushing at high speed. The hero noticed how she managed to strike, believing that if she were an ordinary warrior, the attack would only wound the monster. A short girl with incredible strength, the skill of a superhuman, rushed into a crowd of enemies. The girl cut one of the bears in half and used wide lunges towards several more, killing them. One of the girl's mithril swords was broken, but that wasn't a problem. She immediately pulled out the next sword from her belt. Mine struck another blow towards another monster. Then, the girl realized that even more furious beasts were looking at her, drooling from their mouths. Standing before them, the girl, without losing confidence, jumped to attack the monsters standing before her. successfully defeating each of them with one graceful blow. According to Shoji's observations, the girl was already a completely different person. Previously, she was afraid of breaking her weapon, which is why she had to fight at less than full strength, which made her unsure of herself. But thanks to the hero and his skill, Mine didn't have to worry about losing her weapon. So the girl gave it her all with a dazzling smile of happiness on her face, not fearing anything. As the monster squealed under Mine's attacks, he reasoned that it would normally take a cannon to defeat them, but the bears were easily defeated with a sword. At that moment, the boy understood why the king and his entourage wanted a hero with fighting skills. Mine might have been useful on the battlefield, but the people in this kingdom didn't have the means to utilize the girl's strength to the fullest. The happy girl finished her battle, feeling great, because fighting without worrying about damaging her weapon was her dream. After the battle was over, Mine and Shoji clapped their hands, and the girl promised to protect the hero. As her sponsor, Akina was happy for her happiness. Thus they finished off well off. And a month after Mine was recruited, the two of them stood in front of the loan shark's office, planning to pay off the girl's debt. On one of the alleys of the capital, Akina and Mane approached the office of the loan shark company Golded, where the girl owed money. But before entering, the girl doubted that everything was okay, because the amount of her debt was 1,000 gold coins. The guy understood her interest, because the sum of 10 million yen was huge, but the man assured the girl that he would pay for her and give her freedom. The girl felt uneasy. The hero asked her not to make a sad face and suggested going inside. Mine, in turn, promised to protect Shoji even at the cost of her life. Counting on this, the guy opened the office doors and was met with the glances of several men. Just by looking at them, Akina realized that they were engaged in debt collection, and justifying their status, they immediately began to communicate aggressively and rudely. The hero noticed that he had already become unaccustomed to the behavior in the service sector when the loan sharks doused the girl with cigarette smoke, mocking her, having recognized their debtor. The girl felt weak in front of them because of her debt, but Shoji quickly reassured her. Turning to the moneylenders, the hero said that they had come to pay off Mine's entire debt. No one in the room could believe what was said. They assumed that the girl had become the mistress of some nobleman, and that paying off the debt was intended to anger the company boss. Akina didn't quite understand why the boss would be angry after paying the debt, when a man came out of the back room, complaining about the loud man. This man was the head of the moneylenders, Golded, dressed in expensive and high-quality furs. Upon seeing the girl, the company boss mocked Mine, believing that she had finally agreed to become his servant. Assured that he was a good man, Golded promised that he would treat her well. He was already stretching out his hand towards the girl's body when the hero intercepted it and shook it, causing bewilderment on the face of the chief of the moneylenders. Akina, expecting such actions from someone like him, could not show fear and planned to play the good man, hoping for Mine's protection. He introduced himself as the girl's employer and said that he wanted to pay off her debt since she accompanies him at work. Then, Golded reminded him that, even if the boy had been a kind employer, Mine's debt was 1,000 gold coins. Not even a nobleman could pay that amount. But in response, other subordinate moneylenders conveyed the guy's intention to pay the entire amount. Hearing this, Golded looked at Shoji with a puzzled expression while pouring some drink into his glass. Convinced of the seriousness of his intentions, he remained silent for a while, thinking about the situation. And then he decided to tell me that Mine had a special skill, and that if he was planning to use it, he was out of luck. He said that the girl's skill made her so strong that she broke her weapons, declaring them useless, and asked if he still wanted to pay off her debt. Shoji said that he already knew all of Maya's problems, and claimed that he definitely wanted to pay off her debt in full. After these words, the heavy gazes of the members of the moneylenders' company fell upon them, and the hero immediately felt the thirst for murder. These people finally showed their true intentions, right after the hero said that he would pay the debt. But Akina didn't understand why Golded was so worried about getting paid, and why he lent money to Mine, knowing he couldn't pay it back. Remembering that the conversations about the girl's skill had worried the head of the office, the guy guessed that they were planning to use her, without allowing others to do so. After all, he had planned from the very beginning to kidnap the girl by debt and abuse her skill, and a servant with great strength could be used for crimes. Expecting such an outcome, Akina did not plan to hand over his dear employee to these bad people. after which Golded changed the original amount to 1,500 coins, causing bewilderment on the hero's face, since the amount had only recently been named. The head of the company explained that his subordinates had calculated the interest incorrectly, which the moneylenders, in collusion, also confirmed. The girl complained about the unfair increase in the amount of debt, but Golded said that it was all because of the interest accumulated up to that point. By provoking them to calculate the percentages manually, the company's manager took a confident position. This provocation was aimed at taking into account the fact that in this world, only a few rich people and merchants' apprentices were literate and knew accounting. So someone like Maine couldn't say exactly how much he owed, which is what the company used, but looking at the grinning face of the company boss, Akina, having already predicted something like this, dumped 1,500 gold coins from his bag onto the table. Under the stunned looks of the moneylenders, the hero said that there were exactly 1,500 gold coins on the table and asked them to count them for him. But Golded and the others still couldn't believe their eyes, and the fact that the young man had foreseen this situation. Besides all this, he prepared a lot of money to pay, even if they raised the debt by another 500 coins. It took some time to calculate, after which Shoji demanded a loan agreement since he had paid the required amount. The contract was hastily brought, and after Golded signed it, the boy only had to leave his signature. Having completed all the necessary actions, the coveted contract was concluded, and the debt was paid. The hero and the girl hurried to leave the premises. In the process, the young man noticed the forced smile of the office manager. After a short silence, the girl, being very impressed, sincerely thanked Shoji. But Akina said that this was only the beginning. Sometime later, evening fell on the city. The hero and the girl were sitting in his private house and having dinner, when the battle with the Golded Company was about to begin in earnest. Sometime later, dark characters began to gather around the hero's area, and mine and Shoji's dinner was interrupted by a scream that signaled the arrival of people. Akina and her partner were already expecting the robbers, which is why they heard a scream. It was from two people who fell into a prepared wolf pit. Immediately after this, the moment for their counterattack arrived. The girl set fire to the wooden blocks in the fireplace, and holding one in each hand, she left the house, accompanied by Shoji's wishes for caution. The girl calmly left the house when one of the attackers noticed her. He did not know what Maine was going to do. The first thing she did was throw the burning stick with all her might at the nearest enemy, hitting the target right on target. Even a simple torch in Mine's hands would be a dangerous weapon, because she had the superhuman skill. One of the bandits called for the others to remain calm, as they only needed to find Shoji to win. Then Akina handed the girl another batch of torches, which immediately flew at the enemies. One of the opponents with an eye patch ordered his comrades to dodge and not to underestimate the torch as a weapon, because the opponent had skill. When another group of enemies approached, the girl threw torches right at their feet. While the bandits were mocking the opponent's accuracy, the girl finished providing visibility to reveal the enemy's position. The next moment, the guy handed the container into the hands of Mine, who immediately ran towards the enemies. With a loud exclamation, she released what was in the basket, not giving the bandits time to think about anything. Even after the attack, they could not understand what had happened, while the hero and his partner decided to repeat, and Akina was already serving another basin. At this time, the attackers decided to dodge and ran away, but it did not help them. The attack was scattered, hitting every enemy. Then the attackers realized that they needed to hide behind cover and began searching the entire area for places where they could hide. But the hero's house was surrounded by a hedge wall, and the thick trees from the enemy's wall were chopped down into torches. Thus they threw burning bars to illuminate the area, showing the complete lack of cover. The hero gave Mine the basket of finishing attacks. It contained small stones that once filled the field. Akina collected them, thinking they would be useful in the girl's hands. The guy called the throwing weapon a basket shotgun, and the attack hit the leader of the attackers, leaving the rest of the attackers at a loss as to what to do. And before they could escape, Shoji ordered them to surrender, threatening to attack if they tried to escape. Realizing the danger of the situation, the bandits stopped resisting and surrendered, begging for their lives, because they did not want to risk their lives for money. The young man then asked Mine to tie up the surrendered men while she praised Shoji's tactics. But he was sure that it was pointless to take him by sheer numbers. Sometime later, the young man and his partner showed up at the office of the recent moneylenders. They found them sleepy. They had probably been waiting all night for news from the attackers. And when they saw Shoji directly, they were surprised that he was alive. Not understanding what the moneylenders meant, Akina asked to call Golded, saying that he had an important conversation with him. The office staff asked them to wait and went to call their boss, while the man and the girl waited patiently. A little later, Golded came out of the doorway asking what business they had come for. Shoji told him that bandits had broken into his house yesterday, and without listening to the chief's answer, he moved on to the most important part. According to him, the bandits broke into his house and said that they had come to kill him on orders from Golded himself. He only replied that he had nothing to do with it, ignoring the provocation. But the guy continued, saying that the attackers were detained as slaves to the crime. While mock noting that he was really glad to know that Golded wasn't involved, Akina noted his attempt to make Mine his servant. The moneylender, having lost patience, asked the guests to leave, replying that he wanted to sleep. Assuming that he had been working late, Akina merely said that it was harmful to his health. And figuring that the military police would soon arrive, he suggested not going to bed at all, and left with Maine. When she went outside, the girl remained in mute silence, and later she was indignant, not understanding why it was necessary to provoke the moneylenders. Mine was still afraid, as she unconsciously could not stand Golded's company. But the hero calmed her down, explaining that it was on purpose, so that the robbers would become more restrained. Despite the fact that in the girl's opinion it was for the worse, because they would attack again, this was what Akina wanted. Explaining that they would attack only when everything calmed down again, he also added that next time they would be much better prepared. Shoji also said that he took into account that the company was concerned about their image, and deliberately provoked them into an early attack. All they had to do was give a warm welcome. The girl could only be surprised at how comfortable Akina felt in this situation. On Earth, at work in the company, scandalous people often came to him, whose type of thinking was similar to Gyuujiru's. A little later at night, the robbers crept up to the house, not noticing the observation of the hero and his companion. The next thing the attackers did was place a pot on the ground and use magic to make it smoke. The house was completely engulfed in poisonous purple smoke of an abnormal state. While the hero noticed the direction of the smoke, Mine explained that it was controlled by magic. Having learned about this method of using magic, Shoji did not expect anything different from the other world. But everything that happened was still within the expected range. Seeing the poisonous smoke, the young man suggested drinking a potion of resistance to paralysis, poison, and sleep. Based on the idea, expecting a change in approach, Shoji purchased potions and multiplied the money with the cultivation skill. Having bought a full set of potions from the royal potion shop, he was thinking about selling them because of the good price. At this time, the robbers began to move, damaging the fence, creating shelters. The hero planned to make them fix everything. The bandits slowly made their way into the house, but there was no one there. After going further into the darkness, two of those who entered disappeared. It was not visible to them what was in the darkness. The whole house was one big trap, in which there was a huge one. Mine was surprised that, despite the simplicity of the trap, someone got caught in it. But Akina explained that the attackers were hiding and could not use light, not even realizing that there would be a hole inside the house. Besides, the hole was deep, and it was dug specifically by Mine, using her superhuman skill, which was useful for physical work. Not understanding what had happened inside the house, one of the attackers called for the boss, realizing that the robbery had been discovered. Golded came and ordered the light to be launched into the house, after which a ball of light followed from one of the magicians. Only then did they see that there was only a huge hole inside the house. Now that the guy was exposed, the second round of the battle began. After the robbers gathered near the house saw the trap prepared for them, they found out that there was no one in the house and began searching the area. At this point, the hero relied on Mine, since the enemy could not kill her, which is why she could calmly fight on the front lines while Shoji waited behind. The next moment, he noticed a couple of hooded people among the crowd of attackers, without recognizing who they were. The girl said that she went on the attack, and when several members of the attacking squad discovered her, they were shocked to see her holding several whole logs. With a furious cry, Maine threw the logs into the crowd of opponents, who were completely unprepared for such an outcome, destroying the house in the process, hitting and damaging all of her enemies. This was one of Shoji's tactics, since the house could be rebuilt, especially since it was shabby. And the hero produced logs with his cultivation skill, some of which he used for torches. The girl, armed with a couple of logs, attacked the remaining opponents after the previous attack. Flying into the crowd of fleeing bandits, she spun like a top, knocking down and sending into the air everyone she hit. Mine's skill seemed amazing to the hero when she sent another enemy mage flying, after which light magic still remained. Then the robbers decided to surround the girl, grab the logs, and block her, because they could not kill her or attack her with any weapon. As they piled on, they noticed that the log in Mine's hands was close to breaking, and the next moment it broke completely. Deciding that this was their chance, the bandits rushed to attack, but they forgot that the girl had an armory sponsor in the person of Shoji, who gave her the mithril swords. With their help, she easily drove away the attacking enemies, who hastily retreated from the battlefield, despite Golded's attempts to calm them down. The chief of the moneylenders was displeased, because only 2 opponents came forward against such a crowd, and he stepped forward onto the battlefield. Realizing the futility of his subordinates, he tore the robe from the mysterious man, ordering him to join the battle. Akina and his partner looked at the huge man, dressed in armor from head to toe, in surprise. The girl was especially impressed to see the man in armor when Golded announced that Mine wasn't the only one with the skill. Confirming the thoughts that arose in the girl and Shoji, he said that this man, unlike Mine, was unable to pay off the debt and became a servant of the moneylender. Using orders and magic, Golded commanded the armored man to catch the girl. The next second, a massive attack fell on the girl, which she managed to dodge. After which, she asked the hero to move away. Akina noticed that the girl's movement slowed down. She did not dare to attack, knowing that the enemy was an innocent person. The guy assumed that Mine would be able to penetrate ordinary steel armor, but as soon as the attack hit the enemy, the defense was not penetrated, and the sword was broken. At the moment of impact, a glow appeared that enveloped the attacker's body, breaking Mine's weapon with one blow. As the armored man continued his attack, Golded explained that his servant had a defensive skill, and even the girl would have a hard time. This explained why the armor was so hard. Such skills could strengthen not only the body, but also the armor worn. Golded threatened to impose a contract once he caught Mine, and then force her to kill Shoji with her own hands. But the girl was sure that despite the fact that a magical contract could be concluded by force, it could not be used to give orders to kill. While the hero was pondering this, Golded explained that in their case, they had a mage in their office who could make an unusual contract. This explained everything, but Akina had already assumed something like this, so only Mine was surprised. The girl was indignant that he would be caught as a criminal when they found out what he was doing, but Golded did not agree. Some of the country's nobles were on his side. There were always people willing to have servants do secret work, so places like his office always had plenty of valuable clients. In addition, the servants could not tell the truth because of the contract, which gave free rein to the moneylenders. Akina couldn't help but notice that the kingdom was seriously rotten, but despite that, it was too easy to talk about it. Golded's next order was to tell the armored man to finally catch Mine by making him feel pain. As the girl was being attacked, Shoji was amazed at how illegal magic was used to cause pain to a person in order to carry out orders. The girl attacked the enemy again, but broke her weapon, and, wanting to take a spare sword from Shoji, was blocked by other servants. She couldn't attack them, and the only weapon she had was a sheath. Then Mine, looking back at the hero, decided to take some action, surprising the hero. The next second, Golded gave another order to attack while the girl was unarmed, causing the knight with wild eyes to rush at the girl. Then she, snatching the scabbard, despite Shoji's concern, attacked the enemy, because he fell for her trick. The blow was delivered with the sword's scabbard and passed through the armor, starting from the belt and hitting the chest. Besides everything else, Akina only now noticed that all the previous blows were concentrated on one point. Thus, the last blows exceeded the limit of the defense skill, leaving only simple armor. Mine couldn't watch as the man, suffering, obeyed orders, but he planned to attack her employer, because of which the girl was ready to interfere, throwing all her strength. After a series of attacks, Mine achieved a crushing victory and, landing on the ground, declared herself Shoji's guard, which the boy was happy about. Seeing what happened, the bandits started to run, despite the boss's orders to attack the unarmed heroes. But when the girl confronted Golded again, he cowardly hid behind the backs of innocent servants, fleeing the battlefield while swearing revenge. Thus, they missed the moneylender, which Mine greatly regretted. But Shoji did not care, because in his opinion, Golded was already finished. Even though their office was under the protection of the nobles, Akina could still influence it. 2 days later, in the evening, constables came to the moneylender's office to check the office for suspicions of illegal trading. Only servants were found in Golded's office, but he himself escaped. Afterwards, the soldiers checked the contract magic applied to the servants they found. As it turned out, the illegal magic was disguised, as a result of which the loan shark Golded was put on the wanted list for illegal trade and disguising the contract magic. The accumulated property will be divided, and after the criminal is caught, society will let off steam. A little later, at the inn, Mine was amazed that she and Shoji had defeated Golded, even though they hadn't captured him yet, not understanding how they managed to capture someone under the protection of nobles. The guy explained that not all the nobles defended the moneylender, and the other side could be provided with useful information. When Mine didn't understand, he explained it more simply. Golded was protected by nobles who were buying servants illegally. The fact of such trade could become a problem in the country, but the nobles were divided into several factions that competed with each other. Thus, the different sides were constantly in conflict. He said he sent a letter about the moneylender to nobles who did not support his actions and provided illegal contracts as evidence. He entrusted the collection of information about the nobles on Golded's part to the taciturn adventurers of the Adventurers Guild. Considering that it was impossible for a stranger to meet with the nobles without a letter of introduction, and Akina did not want to get involved with them, he easily solved this problem. The hero presented money to the guards of the mansion of the required nobleman and instructed them to deliver the necessary documents. Thus, due to the factional struggle, the nobles were only too happy to begin investigating Golded. While the girl was surprised by the hero's knowledge and skills, he remembered that his company on Earth also had factions, from which he had gained skills. All that was left was the escaped Golded, but there was no need to worry about him anymore. The nobles who were his allies were also forced to pursue him so as not to reveal their connections. But the hero could not exist for him, and he wished his partner to work hard and go to a new city that day. Sometime later, the former moneylender boss ran out of breath through the alleys of the city, wondering how he had ended up in this situation. Even his subordinates had fled. He blamed Shoji for everything that happened because if it weren't for the hero, Mine would have belonged to him, and he was going to use her profitably. The moneylender even took various measures to prevent Maine from repaying the debt. But at some point, Akina came and paid the girl's debt in full. Also repelled 2 attacks and later sent guards to his office. Golded was greatly helped by the secret passage in his room. Remembering all this, he swore to take revenge and kill the hero, and then make Mine his servant. But to do this, he first had to escape from this country, for which he needed a horse, which he was already thinking of stealing. His thoughts were interrupted when his body flipped over into a horizontal position, causing him to fall. Finding himself in this situation, he realized that he couldn't even say anything. Then an unknown person approached him. He explained that Golded's body movements were sealed, and also said that there was an order to kill him on the spot, without any torture. While the moneylender helplessly begged for salvation, unable to even open his mouth, his life was abruptly cut short. Sometime later, Akina was cleaning up the remains of a destroyed house on his property, when the girl told Shoji that they had guests. Not understanding who the people who appeared were, he quickly realized that they were former servants who had been caught by them during Golded's attack. They said that they were indebted to him and wanted to thank him properly, and then, bowing to the ground, they thanked him for saving them. One of them explained that thanks to the hero's appearance, they were freed from their status as servants, and their debts were also cleared. The boy understood that in order to attack the nobles, their opponents treated the servants as victims, freeing them without sending the servants to the market. Despite everything, each of the now free people was sincerely grateful to the man. They were not going to forget about the kindness, and showed a strong sense of duty. Then the guy asked if they had reliable work now, when many sighed heavily. Someone could return to their native village or find work with relatives, but not everyone, so everyone had problems, remembering which they became despondent. But despite this, Akina participated only in order to obtain the mine that was useful to him, and understood that he did not need any extra problems. The next second, the girl called the hero aside. She asked him to help these people. He understood her feelings, but he couldn't support so many people, even if he raised money. Mine, realizing this, suggested hiring these people to Shoji's shop She explained that in the future he would probably own a shop or organize caravans. He seriously considered that if he wanted to achieve more quickly as a merchant, he needed people to supervise the sale of goods. Confirming Main's logic, he noted that he had not thought like a leader due to his years of working in a corporate office. With that mindset, he could not continue to pursue his dream. While the hero was thinking about this, the eyes of people waiting for an answer were directed in his direction, their eyes full of hope. The next moment, he turned to the crowd of people and, nervous from the gaze of so many people, announced an offer of work in his store. Respecting their wishes, Akina did not care that they were servants in the past, and after everyone's agreement, he decided to count on them. Then they asked him as the owner to take care of them. This status of his was explained by the fact that, having become a large merchant, he hired more than a dozen people. That's what they called a director in this world. The happy new employees promised to follow Shoji for the rest of their lives, which confused the guy, but now he had to think about it every time he recruited workers. The next day, Akina came to the capital to the workshop district, where he visited a blacksmith. When they met, the dwarf told him that someone was targeting the hero. Shoji was in for another problem. The main character and his partner look in surprise at the gnome who told them the bad news. In the forge on Workshop Street, the hero learns that he is being targeted because of his connection to Golded and the Gun Killer. Because of this, some individuals appeared who wanted to get rid of the hero. They even came to the gnome to find out at least something. Akina came with Mine to repair the weapon, while preparing to hire the former servants when they heard this story. After Golded was captured, all the nobles who had been buying illegal servants were discovered, so the balance of influence among them changed. Shoji assumed that the nobles had suffered losses and sent assassins, but he was not eager to die. The blacksmith advised him to run away quickly. After saying goodbye to him, Akina and his partner left when Main asked for forgiveness, feeling guilty for what was happening, but the guy calmly shared these problems with her. The girl was happy with this relationship. Shoji suggested speeding up the plan and leaving the country as soon as possible to start their own business. But Mine didn't know what to do with all the new employees. Escaping with a dozen people would be difficult, and the hero did not know whether he would be able to provide them with work in another country. Therefore, not wanting to take risks, he decided to stick to the plan. Sometime later, at the Merchant Guild, the former servants came in a crowd to sign documents. Akina and Mine watched this process in disguise. New employees were being trained to work as salespeople in a store in this country, primarily the qualifications of a trader. Those who joined were treated well and supported, and roles were assigned according to each person's strengths. In the future, the staff will operate a domestic store, selling shoji products grown overseas. Finally, Mine and Akina found time to decide where to run, for now, disguised as townspeople. Having started talking about escaping, the couple left the room after saying goodbye to the staff. The girl suggested that the boarder had been informed of their possible escape using communication magic, which surprised the guy, who had underestimated the other world, so he figured there was nothing left to do but leave the country. But that too was difficult, according to Main. She explained that there were tracking mages at the border who kept an eye on those who crossed the border without going through the outpost. But it was impossible to track the entire border, because with the exception of plains and areas with shelters, tracking magic was not cast on dangerous lands. But Main suggested that it would be impossible to deliver goods from abroad through such lands. Akina sighed at how difficult it was to escape the country and, at the same time, arrange for the supply of goods when there was no time even to gather information. Believing that this was a dead end, the hero considered starting all over again, but he did not want to abandon the people he had already hired. After some thought, Mine suggested the Dark Forest of Destruction. The hero learned that it was a dangerous forest with many monsters, but there should not be tracking magic there. In addition, the forest was surrounded by each country, but was not cut down so as not to create corridors for invasion. Also, the forest itself emitted special waves that weakened the mages. Even the forest's length was roughly equal to one country, but even so, the girl still recommended this dangerous forest because she was confident in her abilities. Agreeing with Mine, the hero also denied that the girl was bragging only because of Shoji's arsenal, but it was in this that he found her strength. Akina decided that if he could capture the forest, it would be easy to ensure the supply of goods and choose the country after his escape. Having absorbed the information, the young man urged the girl to plan an escape, but before that to think about their breakthrough through the forest and the items for this. A little later, Shoji and Mine visited the capital's potion shop. The young man noticed that his partner became a reliable person when she was determined. As he entered the store, the boy realized that it was different from the shop where he had previously bought potions, and he was in anticipation. Looking at the goods on the shelves and the various customers, the hero noticed a girl who took a potion from the shelf. She seemed to him a graceful and calm beauty. Noticing this look of Shoji, Mine distracted him by reminding him how to distinguish potions by color. Blue ones heal wounds, green ones, poisoning, and yellow ones, paralysis. You could also tell the quality of the potion by its transparency. Cheap potions had a little sediment, but good quality potions didn't. But quality potions were so expensive that not everyone could afford them, which was expected from consumables. Mine, wanting to take matters into her own hands, offered to choose good and inexpensive potions herself, but was interrupted by a guy who offered to buy a high-quality potion right away. Without listening to the rest of what was said, he understood quality by transparency, and reasoned that if there were dangerous monsters in the forest, they should have brought the best goods. The next moment, the hero approached the seller, asking to sell him 10 pieces of each of the best potions, surprising everyone around. Buying the highest potions en masse only meant that he was rich, even though he didn't look like anyone who was rich. Some people assumed that Akina was a servant of some nobleman and continued to keep an eye on him. The hero understood that his actions were similar to those of an oil magnate who bought up all the goods in the store on Earth. Then his gaze met the recent beauty. He noticed that she was also surprised and looked at him, and then smiled. The hero couldn't understand the premonition from the meeting under Mine's displeased look. The next moment, the guy was called by the sellers who had finished preparing the potions. Suddenly, Shoji saw an unusual potion and asked what it was. The shopkeeper told him it was a monster protection potion. If you sprinkled it on the cart, the smell would keep monsters away. Moreover, if used once, the hero would not encounter any monsters for a whole week, which Shoji thought was convenient. The woman they had recently crossed paths with threw back a punch, but Mine had never heard of a potion with such an effect. Then the merchant hastened to convince them that this product was sold to them by a magician traveler, so the store had definitely checked the effect. The cost of one potion was 10 gold coins. For this money, you could hire several adventurers for a week. While everyone around was discussing the price of the potion, the guy decided that it suited him and wanted to stock up on this product, despite everything else. Akina asked how effective the potion was, to which the seller replied that the mage who sold them had assured him that the potion could deal with B- rank monsters. Mine immediately explained that B rank was intended for a group of high-ranking adventurers. So the boy decided that if he could reduce Mine's burden in the forest, he wanted to know the market price of the potion. After that, he began bidding, wanting to buy all the potions in stock if they would sell them to him for 6 gold coins apiece. Although the purchase of all goods was astonishing, 6 gold was too little. While the girl was still in doubt, the seller agreed to a price of 8 gold pieces per piece. The partner says that, to be honest, she thinks that they won't be able to sell it. Then Shoji asked his partner if this product would be popular. After some thought, the girl said that they would not be able to sell this product because it was cheaper to hire people. After hearing this, the salesman asked to wait a bit and ran off to another room. Moments later, 2 people were already hurrying back. The store manager approached the hero and said that if he purchased all the potion stocks, it was possible to reduce the price to 7 gold coins. However, the potions cost 200 gold. If converted to Earth currency, it was several million yen, which explained the surprise of those present. But Akina still announced that he would buy everything, having reached a point of compromise, and the sellers were happy to get rid of dead stock and return the purchase price. When making the deal, the guy left 40 gold pieces as a deposit, and planned to pay the rest of the amount after the goods were delivered. Returning home and already planning to plant the purchased potions, Akina again met the recent beauty. Another meeting made the hero doubt whether the girl was a stalker when Mine stood in a stupor. She complained that Shoji looked at this girl with a large bust and long black hair like a fool. Realizing what was happening, Akina suggested that she go home and check out various things, which helped improve the girl's mood. Thinking about the dark force of destruction, which was a super dangerous area, he came up with something interesting thanks to the monster protection potion. Sometime later, the guy stood in front of the carcass of a huge snake, on which the girl stood, asking him how serious he was about living in such a place. And Shoji, in response, suggested that the potion combined with Mine's power, and they would not have to run anywhere, declaring the Dark Forest of Destruction as their new main base. Illuminated by the rays, Mine stood on the carcass of the snake-like monster. Remembering how it happened, as well as the girl's question about whether they would seriously live in this place, the hero looked back some time ago. A little earlier, on the second day since they entered the Dark Forest, the hero was tired of walking when they came to a huge tree and sat down to rest on its roots. Noticing the man's out-of-breath appearance, his partner suggested that they start training, not taking into account that she herself possessed superhuman skills. The girl also noted that there was silence in the forest when usually a monster would immediately attack. It just meant that the monster protection potion worked, so the purchase was worth it. The monsters ran away just after seeing the potion evaporate. The hero could only believe the rumors about the potion of protection against monsters. That's why, before they entered the forest, the guy said that they would hide from their pursuers by going through the Dark Forest of Destruction. But immediately after purchasing the potion, the hero decided to make a base in this forest, which is why the girl asked about the reasons for the choice. The man explained that even if they fled to another country, it would not necessarily be safe there, and no one followed them in the forest. At this moment, Mine was doing some task, attaching something to the tree trunk. She installed the weapon, because even with the potion, they had problems. When the hero spoke of a problem, he meant the monster that was quickly approaching them. A rank monster, king of the Dark Forest of Destruction, a large snake carrying the carcasses of forest bears in its mouth. The C-rank monster was just prey for the snake. Before visiting the forest, Shoji learned about and gathered information about the king of the forest, and then reviewed their equipment. A mithril sword made by a dwarf, and some light armor for the hero that protected his weak spots. The girl finished her preparations, and knowing that safety in this forest was the most important thing, the hero believed that defeating the king of the forest would be a new step for them. Mine didn't understand why the boy thought they could live here only by defeating the snake, when the location of the base hadn't even been decided yet. Akina only said that the monster had to be defeated first. While they were discussing this, the king of the forest himself loomed over them, preparing to attack them from behind. The sudden appearance of the snake was expected. It was just a little earlier than Shoji had planned. The next second, the snake attacked the hero and his partner. Defending herself from the attack, the girl broke her sword on the monster. Then the girl decided to pull out something more solid. Taking a stance, she pointed the blade at the snake. While the leaves were falling around, the girl and the snake exchanged tense glances. At the same time as the leaves fell, Mine and the monster began to move, knocking down trees, chasing each other. Finally, the girl struck with her sword and also made an additional attack on the snake, but it only became more angry. The monster lunged, but Mine managed to dodge the attack despite Shoji's concern. The next attack was stopped by the poisonous spray that the hero already knew about. At that moment, the girl could not get closer and attack. Seeing the hopelessness of the situation, Akina pulled the cord, believing that the position and speed of the snake were suitable. At that moment, the girl looked back and realized what exactly they had been installing all this time. The cord pulled along a huge number of boxes of potions, each of which was poured onto the snake. Not long ago, the hero and Mine prepared this trap from potions of protection against monsters, and the girl was surprised by the increase in the number of potions, but the hero said that he bought more of them. According to the list of ingredients of the potion, monsters were afraid of poison. Therefore, even an A-rank monster would stop moving if poisoned. Having lost the ability to move, the monster was vulnerable to any attacks, and when Akina gave the order to attack, the girl tore out the trees by their roots. Taking one in each hand, she rushed at the monster, trembling in fear. Mane had the snake trapped behind trees, creating a double containment, and deciding this was her chance, she charged. But the next second, the snake tore the tip of its body out of the trap and immediately attacked Mine. She wrapped her tail around the girl, while the hero worried about his partner, who had fallen into the snake's clutches. The monster secreted mucus from its skin, and small snakes began to crawl out of its tail, crawling under the girl's clothes. Without allowing herself to be bitten, Mine freed herself from the enemy's grip, demanding that he not underestimate her, which surprised even the hero. The girl announced that she was a guard for a rich merchant, and that was where their business and adventures began, and the first step was defeating the monster. Mine, jumping into the attack, promised that the monster would become rust on the sword. Having cut it into several pieces, She left no chance for survival, standing in a victory pose on the monster's carcass. Realizing Mine's true power, the hero understood why Goldudu wanted the girl so much. So the guy decided to pay a bonus, which pleased her. That's exactly what happened, and returning to the question of life in this place, the hero answered that he was assessing the strength of his partner and the effects of potions, which he did secretly so as not to make the girl nervous, also omitting the details of the trap. But as a result, Mine was able to resist the monster, and the territory of the snake's lair was vast, and the monsters did not approach because of the strength and smell. That is why, after their victory, they were able to make this place a new base. All they had to do was bring a cart here and build an office. Continuing the next stage of Akina Shoji and his partner's journey, they had to build an office in a dark forest of destruction. Although Main did most of the work, the boy hammered nails and joined lumber. Starting with leveling the ground, the girl prepared a level plot of land for building a house in several stages, using one log. The next step was the foundation. The girl erected the supports with one throw. Shoji had to fit the processed logs one by one. The girl finished the construction of the processed logs with a simple throw, and after some time the guy was finishing the final touches. Akina and her partner went to look at their house from the side. The beautiful office was completed to the delight of the workers. For a newbie, it worked out well, and Shoji's passion for log houses, the experience of which was still alive in him, played a significant role. Although there were some minor construction sites, the hero had not heard of any earthquakes in the area, so he expected everything to be fine. Behind one of the doors was the most important place on the site, the growing field. A fence was built around the field, allowing the hero to increase production in peace, and not even Mine was supposed to disturb him. He planned to increase the number of monster defense potions and especially mithril swords. The supply was exhausted. The girl, entering the house, was happy to finally have her own room. Only rich merchants or nobles could afford this luxury. The hero suggested that they buy various decorations for the rooms on their next trip to the city, which Mine was definitely happy about. The hero also wondered why the entire house was decorated with the bones of a large snake. Speaking of this, the girl decided to be doubly sure and decorate the house with bones to scare away monsters. The man realized that this was proof of the owner of the territory when Mine, after thinking for a bit, also turned to the hero with a question. The question concerned the guy's speech, immediately putting the guy into a stupor. He didn't know what the problem was. But the girl said that she was his subordinate, and asked him to speak in a simpler manner, as with the blacksmith Maudit. She added that she would be happy to speak in the same casual manner. Immediately after that, she, embarrassed, apologized, because this should not have concerned a simple security guard. But Shoji thought about it seriously, agreeing that he underestimated the overly polite attitude. After thinking it over for a bit, he responded to the request with understanding and switched to a lighter manner of communication, which made the girl feel a little embarrassed. Having performed the ritual of acquaintance again, the man realized that from that day on, a new relationship had begun between them, but suddenly he began to shake because she was squeezing his hands, for which she quickly apologized. At this time, the hero was glad that he bought the highest quality body restoration potions. A month later, the hero and his partner were about to go to the store, which they entrusted to their new employees who remained in the city. But the girl did not want to part with the time spent alone. Despite this, the guy said that one of the employees, named Oguma, came to the forest and already reported that there were no traces of pursuit. Therefore, Shoji assumed that the pursuers had given up. In addition, in 1 month he grew various things using cultivation skills, multiplying his goods several times. And besides, they needed to return anyway, since they were running out of funds to pay for hiring employees. The forest was just a front for the office, so they returned to the city to get down to business. Sometime later, they met up with Oguma and other staff members who escorted them to the building. Their new store was shiny on the outside, and the hero complimented the compact-looking building, to which he was asked to also take a look at what was inside. Walking inside, the hero imagined a polished room and neatly dressed employees of his store. This could not but cause admiration in the eyes of the young man and his partner. The employees, having learned about the arrival of the store owner, greeted him, causing him some awkwardness. Having thanked the hired men for their work, he asked them to return to work, because everyone was nervous when the head of the company suddenly arrived. Noting that the store was nice, Mine and Akina sincerely admired it, but Shoji wondered about the price of the store, suspecting that it was expensive since it was located on the main street in a good location and was brand new. But Oguma gave them a quick tour, explaining that despite the store's appearance, there were still areas inside that were unnoticeable to the naked eye and still dilapidated. The current state of the store was old, and the outside was just thin boards pasted on to enhance the customer experience. After all, for a commoner to own a large, beautiful, dignified building, he needed a special permit, which the young man did not know about. To obtain it, a proper reason was needed, a large amount of money and trust, which was not so easy to earn in the city, considering that it was necessary to trade in the city market with the support of influential people for a long time. That's why they were able to buy the store, even though it was small and dilapidated. And since it was too old when they bought it, the first thing the employees did was give the building a fresh look, so they could explain to the authorities that they had not rebuilt it in any way. Oguma and the rest of the workers did a good job, which the hero couldn't help but notice, believing that it was the right decision to listen to mine and hire them. Among other things, the subordinate also revealed that they rented a small house nearby for the employees to live in, as Shoji had instructed. They didn't even expect that in the past, servants would live in any kind of neat house. Ogum also had some question about the work they did. He doubted that they didn't have to work every day, and that they could take 2 days off a week. Akina encouraged them to take 2 days off during the week and spend their time freely, hoping that they were well rested. And despite the active doubts of the interlocutor about the fact that they, former servants, could work in such wonderful conditions, he explained that they would also receive payment for overtime and for overtime. The guy decided to do this because, working for a company on the land, unpaid labor and overtime were the norm. And the hero wanted their store to become and strive to become a good company, which caused sincere gratitude from each store employee. The hero inquired about the opening date of the store, because now the training of the sellers was finished, and when the goods appeared, the store could open at any time. One of the employees said that she had been in business before and was the general manager, which is why the hero decided to trust her and leave everything to her. The hero and his partner were satisfied with the result, after which Akina said to unload the goods in the cart and select the first goods from among all the others. Shoji asked whether the price list he had previously requested had been prepared in the royal capital. Then the employees said that they had collected only those shops that they could enter themselves. After all, some of them sold and bought materials only for the nobility, and sawn timber only for carpenters. After which the guy asked to continue recording price changes in the same format, and was already thinking about what their first product would be. The guy also asked to prepare several carts to transfer the goods near the dark forest of destruction. With a sigh of pleasure, the hero was glad that everything was going well. And a week later, one of his employees approached Shoji. He was excited, even though the store was already planning to open. But the thing was, someone had come to meet the hero. Akina did not understand who was looking for him despite the fact that he was hiding. He assumed that it could have been his pursuers, although they should have lost the trail. But Oguma clarified that the person was a woman who said she would not leave until she met the store owner, which proved that she knew about the boy's attitude towards the store. Oguma also said that the beautiful woman called herself Sasha, which seemed like a familiar adventurer's name to mine. She said that the woman was famous and was a researcher of magical objects. But this did not give the hero an understanding of why such a famous person needed him, and he hurried to meet the guest. When Akina appeared in his store and saw the stately figure of the girl, he immediately recognized her. It was the same beauty they had met earlier in the potion shop, and now she was thanking them for the tea. Main and Akina Shoji were sitting inside a hut. Main was lighting a magic lamp. She showed it to the man to see this magical object that burned even without oil. Akina was surprised by this. He thought that perhaps Ogum had brought this magical item with him along with the situation report. It was the first time he had seen it, and if he thought about it now, there were such magical items during the attack of Golded's group and during the summoning. The girl interrupted Akina's thoughts by telling her that in the royal capital, shops that developed and sold these lanterns seemed to be very popular lately. She continued to talk about how magical items were expensive, and, moreover, it was not easy to make them. The guy raised the lantern higher and happily thought that if their store had a developer who made products like the magic lamp. At the present time, he adjusted his collar, and in his mind he knew that finding the right person was not that easy. Entering Aiken's room, he greeted and apologized for keeping him waiting, explaining that he was changing his clothes. Akina and Main sat down opposite the mysterious beauty they met at the potion shop, after which Oguma left the room. The guy called her Sasha-san, who was a famous researcher of magical items. She realized that it seemed like her name had become a little known. The guy introduced himself as Akina Shoji, also the owner of the store, which made the girl sit in surprise. When Akina asked what was wrong, the girl wanted to know if he had come into the store the other day and did not expect that he was the owner of the store. However, it was a lucky chance. She introduced herself again as Sasha, and as they saw, she was a mage specializing in studying magical items. The guy in the head replied that he had assumed something like that from her appearance. He continued to think that she was a suspicious beauty, and depending on the situation, Main would intervene. Akina asked why she wanted to meet him. Sasha said that she wanted to show them something. The girl lifted her skirt and stretched out her leg. Sasha took one bundle that was under her skirt. She also asked if she had nice legs, but the guy sat with his eyes closed and tried to understand that she showed it of her own free will and why from under her skirt, and Main coughed discontentedly. The beautiful girl opened the package and there were objects inside. Akina and Main looked at them with interest and asked Sasha what it was. Sasha picked up the jug and pointed its open part at them. She said the word chick and pressed the button in the jug. Water poured out of the jug, and a glowing magic circle formed around it. The boy and Main jumped up from their seats in fright. They started to panic, and Main asked if it was a magic item. Akina was worried about his shop because the floor was sinking into the water. Sasha was calm and replied that it was indeed a magical item, and that if you press the switch, even those who are not able to use magic will be able to use the magic devices, and said, "Isn't it amazing?" It was a magical item of the lost magical technology Lost Magic. This item created another magic circle around itself, and the water on the floor began to gather into a funnel. Akina was amazed and asked again about this item. Sasha held her staff above her head and talked about how the lost magic was different from the current one, and that in ancient times there was a very developed magical civilization. She was immersed in her story and continued to say that in those days, unlike today, many things were done with the help of magical items, building a very advanced and civilized society. The children listened to her stories with interest. Sasha touched the next item and explained that ancient magical items have parts that cannot be created today. Nowadays, they cannot create the same items. She picked it up and explained that this magical item could produce simple wind magic even at reduced power, and pressed the button again. After the girl pressed the button, the guy and Main flew back and hit the wall. They lay down on the floor and were amazed that the water on the floor began to dry. They stood up, and Main said that with such capabilities it is possible to defeat robbers in the vicinity, and moreover the power is reduced and it is more surprising than modern magic items. Akina asked if Sasha was going to sell it. The girl refused, saying that she had already used up all the energy of the built-in magic stones, so they could no longer be used. She also demonstrated this by pressing the button again. After Sasha completed the analysis, it was now just trash. Main couldn't believe that this was happening, despite the fact that they were valuable items. Akina stood quietly and thought that this was quite a bold claim. Akina put his hand on his chin and began to think, because she wanted to do something anyway, bringing with her disposable magic items. In other words, their real negotiations began from the moment when Sasha began to say that, since she had already analyzed these items, she could offer something, namely that she was going to restore them and make them usable. The guys asked what she meant. Sasha held out a magic staff and explained that the magical items of lost magic are the pinnacle of magical technology, and many researchers have still not been able to conduct a full analysis or repair the damage. And then she will finally analyze all the lost magic and create an item superior to them all. Sasha's purpose in coming here was to get Shoji-san to finance her research. Shoji suggested that since it was her research, wouldn't it be better to sell it to the country? She said that such public institutions had long ago been monopolized by permanent magicians. The guy thought again, this time about the acquired rights and benefits. Then Shoji suggested that she sell them to an influential person. Sasha replied that such aristocrats wanted something else besides research, and added in her thoughts that, in other words, Sasha herself. Shoji had no doubt that Sasha was beautiful and attractive. Especially when compared to Main, she was incomparably developed. If he forgot this, he felt some kind of terrible rage. Then Shoji asked her to justify her choice of him, because there were other owners of large stores. He kept wondering why she chose him as a candidate for patron, when he had not even formally started the business. Sasha started to take something out of her chest and explained the reason why she had noticed Shoji. He was wondering why she was taking it out of there. The boys were very surprised to see a monster protection potion there, bought from the potion shop. The girl held the potion in her hands and said that, in truth, she had made this potion using an ancient recipe discovered during her exploration of the ruins of Legion. The guy finally understood what it was. Main turned to Shoji and said that the Legia ruins would be difficult for even experienced adventurers to fight against. They were dangerous ruins. Sasha continued to say that exploring the ruins costs money, and the ingredients for the recipe are only valuables and too expensive. Akina added to this the poor sales, so Sasha changed her mind knowing that it was useless because of the cost issue. But if there was someone who bought it, then maybe that person would understand her research, she said. The guy plunged into his thoughts and realized that Sasha sold the potion of protection from monsters in that store in order to find her patron, and he perfectly suited her judgments. He seriously considered the financial assistance the girl offered her in her research into lost magic. Main and Shoji sat silently. The boy's current goal is to try his best to become a free trader in this world. The boy realized that he currently possessed a mass production ability called the skill Cultivation by Store and Guard. He imagined his estates. He thought that they had reached the stage of expanding business contents. Main alone can currently only guard it. Shoji glanced at Sasha. In this regard, Sasha is a researcher of magic items and a mage who has the power to explore dangerous ruins. Although she is a bit strange, but isn't she a super rare and excellently suited person? His eyes lit up, and he realized that this wasn't just a conversation about investing capital. He had to think of it as a hunt for the next right person. In his eyes was reflected a beauty, whose real abilities they still did not know, or she was just a fraud. He decided to be on guard and made a decision. He decided that from now on he would take the conversation seriously. Shoji asked about their advantage in funding this research. Main looked at him in surprise. The guy thought that by determining their advantage, he would attract Sasha to his shop. Sasha counted their advantages. First, she could provide these magical items. She could restore them. The price of special tools, materials, and improvements ultimately amounted to 2,000 gold coins. If you convert it into Japanese yen, it was 20 million yen. Akina thought about it and eventually called Oguma to him. The guy extended his hand to him, and Oguma entered the room and handed him the bag. Shoji agreed, and as a research fund, he was ready to hand her 1,000 gold coins right now. He said that when he received the completed items, he would pay the remaining thousands of gold coins. Oguma and Main looked at him happily. Sasha was very surprised, and asked if he was sure to give thousands of gold in these circumstances. To which she received the answer that there was no problem. The guy would be able to grow restored items. The girl said with a smirk that it was quite provocative to just pay a lot of money like that. Shoji asked if he could provide enough funding if he became a patron, but he had one more condition. Akina said he wanted her to work as an employee at his shop. The duties included making magic items to sell and guarding him as the owner. The time could also be used for research. The guy said that first of all she would undergo a test to see how long she could work as a security guard for several days. Sasha thought about it and eventually agreed. She said that instead of going through the ruins as an adventurer and collecting money for research on her own, working at Shoji's shop would allow her to focus on research. Sasha shook Shoji's hand and accepted the condition. She asked about the fact that she probably had to pass the security check first. Shoji smilingly replied that he was looking forward to it. A few days later, on the road near the dark forest of destruction, Main, Shoji, and Sasha stood looking ahead with their carriage behind them. In his mind, the guy remembered that other employees had asked him to preliminarily explore a nearby village for doing business, and at the same time, check whether Sasha could fight as a guard. Then they heard someone approaching them with a strange sound. Seeing this, the guy said that they had appeared. He said that he had recently heard that monsters had suddenly attacked the village. Main realized who it was. It was a pack of wandering horses, which were rapidly heading towards them with loud cries. Akina extended his hand to Sasha, saying that he would then rely on Sensei. Sasha agreed and asked if he had meant her when he said Sensei. The guy mentally answered her that these were so-called conventions. The guy remembers that Sasha's specialty is a researcher, and as a magician, if she is strong to some extent, that was generally enough. Just in case, Main was also with them. Akina quietly asked Main how strong the wandering horses were. Main was slightly afraid. She said that the wandering horses are cruel monsters that trample their prey with their large hooves, and are also a C- level monster, but fast, difficult to escape from, and difficult to chase. Therefore, in an open environment like now, they became strong B- rank monsters that were getting closer and closer to them. Shoji realized that they were about the same as the group of forest bears that Main had defeated. Sasha confidently headed towards the monsters. Akina would see a mage fight for the first time, and it was worth watching. First, she created a magic circle with a star inside and said that it was time to present her research on her magic. Many more magic circles with different figures inside formed around her. Main hid behind Akina, and they noticed that it had suddenly gotten colder. Sasha crossed her arms over her chest and told them that they would freeze. The girl waved and directed her hands towards the horses and summoned an ice fountain, gathering all the magic circles into one large one. The boys looked at this with admiration and were amazed by the powerful ice magic. It froze the surface of the earth, forcing the horses to stop. But the wandering horses were going to jump over the ice at high speed, which showed that they were unexpectedly smart. Sasha said that thanks to Shoji-san's funding, she was able to immediately restore one ancient magical item that was broken after excavations. She lifted her dress, and from there fell a magical object in the form of a pole. When she took it in her hands, it caught fire. The girl began to twirl this pole. When she said the phrase "re-magic item, ice darkness princess," the ground began to freeze at an even faster speed, and the horses fell into a stupor. Shoji noticed that the freezing speed had become faster and was surprised. The monsters fell with a crash onto the icy ground and were unable to get up, making loud sounds as they returned. Sasha looked pleased and asked the guys how they liked her restoration of the magic item. Shoji was surprised that she could already restore magic items. And Main spoke with admiration about the combination of magic and an item. The girl had not finished yet, and when she saw the wandering horses running away from them, she created another magic circle and said that it was useless for them to evade, calling them children. She spread her arms, saying that it was time to end the show. The boys were shouting that the air had become terribly cold. Lowering her hands down, Sasha suddenly raised them up and a large number of magic circles formed around her. The guys looked at the many magic circles with wide eyes and open mouths. Then Sasha cast a spell on homing ice arrows, and after that, sharp ice arrows formed in the center of each magic circle. Main and Shoji watched with interest what would happen, and the horses began to get nervous. Raising her hands and pointing them towards the target, Sasha said, "Forward," and all the arrows were directed towards the horses. The horses were galloping at a high speed, and Shoji thought they were going to run. But Main said no, and that he should look ahead. Ahead of the fast-moving horses, the ground ice suddenly formed again and the horses fell back to the ground again. The boys were tense, and the horses were completely terrified. Ice arrows pierced the horses one after another. The beasts made sounds of pain, but were soon defeated and dead. Sasha stood proud and pleased with herself. Shoji remembered that Main had said earlier that it was hard to fight in open areas. The girl muttered under her breath that the habitat of these monsters was originally strange and also their numbers were abnormal. The guy realized that she was already in the researcher mode, and from rumors, the researcher of magical items Sasha. She turned to Shoji and asked if she had passed the job exam successfully, to which the boy replied that, of course, she had. Then she said that from now on it was a pleasure to meet her employer-san. She stood on the top of the hill, where the sun reflected her beauty. Shoji looked at her and thought that maybe this was another excellent employee hired by the Akina store. Meanwhile, Main couldn't believe it and was freaking out. A week had passed since Sasha's hiring. In the royal capital of Akina's shop, Shoji and Main were watching Sasha as she showed them a new spell. The girl held a staff with a ball on the end and cast a spell. A magic circle formed on top of the staff, and the girl was very happy about it. The boys looked at her carefully and were intrigued to see the magic circle. But in the end, the ball began to smoke. Sasha giggled and said that in the first place, she was only able to research this staff thanks to Shoji-san's funding, and said that plus another 1,000 gold coins and received the answer that, of course. He didn't expect that he could restore an item with lost magic overnight, unusable. Sasha replied that she had just bought a stone and was able to restore the pattern, but the maximum use had not increased from 6 times 0.99. She also shared that she wanted to create something that surpassed all the lost magic, but Main said that this was already amazing enough. At this point, she stuck out her leg and said that this bonus could be added to the store's merchandise. The girl showed them a flashlight, and Main asked if it was also a magical item. Sasha confirmed it, and, what's more, she used technologies of lost magic and made an item with better characteristics than popular flashlights. The guys hesitated a bit, and Shoji was about to answer something, but Main interrupted him, saying that in 1 week she restored the fire staff and even developed a new product. Sasha clicked the button on the magic lantern, causing it to light up. The guy was amazed by this. Main wanted to compare it with those that were now being sold in the city, and she returned the one that was there before to the store in the royal capital. When Shoji asked about their number, Sasha opened the canvas, which contained 10 more pieces, and said that she received help from Oguma and others. She explained that only she could restore items with lost magic, and if she made the energy and core for this flashlight, the rest of the parts would be easy to produce. The guy was pleased that the development department was able to make these items quickly, and that was good. They went to the village near the dark forest of destruction to start trading right away. Shoji, in his head, tells that it is a village far from the royal capital, with no shops and a deserted village with few people. They make a living as guides. They knew the needs by asking Oguma to explore the village. A man approached them and introduced himself as the village elder and thanked them for defeating the wandering horses. Shoji knew that this village had been attacked by horses, but for some reason, monsters had recently appeared in this village, which were originally supposed to be at a safe distance from the forest. He was told that the attacks had stopped, but looking at the villagers, he realized that the villagers were still afraid of monsters and were tense. He also noticed that they were especially afraid of the darkness of the night. The boy confessed to the village chief that, in truth, they were from Akin's shop. Hearing this, the village chief was surprised. Shoji waved his hands towards his cart and said that they would like to trade in this village. After these words, the village elder said that he would certainly bargain with them. Behind him stood another man, who asked them if they had anything rare from the city. Then the guy replied that they were renting a corner. His plan was to sell the main trade where there was demand, and in this village they would sell lanterns designed by Sasha. Since there is a food shortage in this country, they decided to start with relatively cheap things as usual. They put out goods, and people came up to ask the price and said that it was cheaper than in the capital's stores during their trips. They had the usual things, and soon the guy decided that it was time to start selling lanterns. But to their surprise, a couple of people appeared. They were also traders who said hello to the village and asked permission to also bargain. Shoji asked them who they were, to which the two merchants stood and giggled. One of them took a lantern in his hands and said that they illuminate the dark world with light. Another took the canvas from his lantern and complimented the first merchant by saying that with light, which everyone knows, even plants and trees. Both merchants held a lantern in their hands and, standing in their pose, introduced themselves as the Grigori Magic Lantern Shop. Main told Shoji-san that this shop was their competitor. Shoji reminded her that she'd shown him the lantern shops popular in the royal capital the other day. One of the lantern sellers began to attract the attention of the people by calling them ladies and gentlemen from the peace-loving village. He put his hand on his head and told them that they had seen a monster earlier on the way to this village, and this news surprised Main very much. Shoji realized that he was lying, because just in case, they poured out the potion of protection from monsters made by Sasha on the way to the village. The merchant continued to talk about how he was also scared, just like them, and that the sun would soon set, after which night would fall in the village. He scared the residents by saying that these monsters were not distinguishable there, and rushed at people with screams. Shoji could not understand why he, instead of selling where there was demand, began to scare people. The merchant showed them a lantern and said that they were offering the latest magical lantern from Grigori and offered to light up this village. It was like a forced acceleration of demand. Sasha calmly drank tea, and Shoji understood that they were using a forbidden technique. Then Main shouted that they should not buy from such a store. Then the merchants looked at them strangely and, approaching them, suggested that their store also had magic lanterns. Seeing their lanterns, the second merchant asked what kind of old-fashioned uniform they had, and said that it was nothing compared to the superbly beautiful uniform made by a genius more like himself. To which one of the guys asked if they were exactly like them. This merchant loudly introduced himself as Professor Gridge. who could make anything and was a genius developer of magical items. The first merchant also joined the second merchant's speech by saying that he would sell no matter what and introduced himself as the manager of the Gorige store, where Gori shop with a large profit to the ends of the world. Shoji became a little nervous and wondered what was wrong with them and that maybe they were annoying. The second merchant rated their lanterns as if they were made of some horse bones and said that the characteristics were very weak and that they would not be able to sell it. Main did not tolerate such an attitude, and Shoji told them that they would not know until they tried to sell. Main asked Sasha-san to confirm the guy's words. Meanwhile, Sasha was inside the carriage and was deep in sleep. Main exclaimed that she was indeed asleep and remarked that she often slept. The girl began to worry a little about the fact that developing items and guarding is her job, but despite this, she is not interested in anything other than research. Meanwhile, Sasha continued to sleep and even snored at times. The merchants were already intrigued and noticed the young man's excellent self-control and self-confidence, and offered him a competition after comparing each other's goods and the lantern that would be purchased. Main didn't catch up with them, and Shoji thought that the competition was interesting, and Sasha also continued to sleep. The traders described their lanterns as a magical item, the pinnacle of cutting-edge performance at the moment, and the main thing about it was the brightness. They assured that they would not lose even with the price. The guy answered them that he accepted their challenge. A crowd gathered around them, shouting that things were getting interesting. Night had already fallen in the village, and with its arrival, the village chief asked them to turn on their lanterns for comparison. Shoji and the merchant placed their lanterns on the table and decided to compare the brightness first. They both pressed the buttons on the lanterns. Both lanterns were burning amazingly brightly. The resident shouted that their brightness was about the same and that it would save them at night. Sleeping, Sasha began to yawn and Shoji noticed it. Then they decided to compare prices, and the merchants stated their price, which was 1 gold coin. The guy, without worrying, named his price, which was 2 gold. They discussed the cost price with Oguma and others and set such a price because their materials are expensive and there is no mass production, so it is more expensive. Traders have already begun to rejoice that they have won, because if the brightness is the same, then it is wiser to choose a low price. Shoji listened to their words about what he would do now with a grin on his face, and Main tried to call Sasha-san. The guy understood that brightness was important for a flashlight, and if the brightness was the same, then the price certainly mattered. With his cultivation skill, the guy could cheaply and mass produce. Then he could lower the price, but Sasha's items could become their support in the future, so he didn't want to lower the price by selling it cheaply. Besides, these guys' method is crude, although the things they sell are really good, he thought, and even if their goods are priced a little higher. He knew that even if their product was a little more expensive, the magic item made by Sasha couldn't be lost so easily. Sasha pulled herself together and stood up, which Main was very happy about. She picked up the lantern and asked Shoji-san to hold her glasses for a moment. She said that this function is usually not needed, so she did not explain, but she has not yet reported on all the functions of the flashlight, and there is another function for which you need to press another button at the bottom of the case. By pressing the button, they saw the real result of Sasha's research. After she pressed the button, the light in the lantern went out for a moment, and the guys did not understand what to expect. Here, a light began to emerge from the lantern, which stretched across the entire area around, as if it were spilling. This light spread out to where the shadow was, and soon they were surrounded by a bright light. Almost everyone stood with their mouths open and could not take their eyes off it. It was all very strikingly bright and the crowd was all over them asking for it, and they didn't care that it was a little more expensive. The merchants fell to the ground looking at the crowd taking apart the lanterns, and could not move away from what they saw. Shoji approached them and said that the result seemed obvious. Sasha said with a smile that their magic item was undoubtedly the pinnacle of the present time. She continued to say that the magic item she created incorporated the technology of ancient magic lost magic, and in addition, it made it harder for monsters to approach. The merchants were horrified to hear the lost magic. But Shoji asked them to pay attention to the guys who were waving their hands. The need of the locals was certainly light. But the light in the lantern was not just a bright light, but light that relieves anxiety. The guys said that the residents were looking for this. The merchants got angry and ran away at a fast speed, admitting defeat only this time. Shoji and Main just looked in their direction along with the other villagers. Most of the villagers approached Sasha to praise her invention, calling it the best. Shoji looked at the smug Sasha and realized that she looked like she was interested in nothing but research, but maybe more. Sasha turned away from the lively crowd and said that she was not yet satisfied with such items. The day after the lantern competition, the boys were about to leave the village near the dark forest of destruction. Main was loading the goods onto the cart and Shoji apologized, saying that Oguma had called to pick up the goods. Oguma said it was nothing. The guy recalled yesterday and noted that Sasha's new product was amazing after all. Main became embarrassed, confirming this, and quietly said that she was in the background at that time. She mumbled that she also tried selling and would try in security. Shoji asked her again, not understanding what she was saying. Here Sasha stood in front of her manager San and said that she would try to do the same in security on the way back, but on the way home she would like to stop by for shopping for research. Main looked at this with surprise. Shoji asked Sasha-san to guard Oguma and the others with the goods back to the capital since they had business elsewhere. Main could not believe it and was glad. He and Main arrived at their cabin in the woods, and the boy asked the girl what was wrong because she was acting strange. Main was very embarrassed and said that after all, she was the main guard and that they were carelessly left alone. The guy told her that he had some business in the field and asked Main to go get some water from the reservoir and was shocked when he actually went to the field. Before entering the field, he reflected that now that Sasha had become a comrade, this was an important event for him to continue trading, the second part. Entering the field, he saw many magic staffs sticking out of the ground, and this was a continuation of trade. He looked at his harvest with pleasure. Growing a staff with lost magic, received from Sasha, grew a rare magic item after all. He snatched one magic item from the ground and understood that it was, like in games, a little trick to infinitely increase the valuable item. It seemed so exciting to him. With one button on it, the magic staff uses magic. Shoji said that he would also like to use it at least once to confirm its functionality. But his attention was drawn to the screen and the crackling of his field, and she began to get a little nervous. He quickly went outside to see what it was and saw someone's clawed paws. The creature made a fushu sound and was of large size with 6 large, strong arms. Shoji looked at it and froze for a moment, and the beast stood in front of him and looked at him. The guy screamed that it was a monster that looked very dangerous and was completely terrified. He started looking for Main, but then remembered that he asked her to bring water, and remembering that he was holding a magical item in his hand, he decides to use it. The beast rushed at him with a loud growl, and Shoji fell to the ground and pressed the button of the magic item. The place where the monster stood was blown up by a magical object that created a magic circle around itself. Shoji was already glad that everything worked out, and that with this item, even he became combat ready. But this did not stop the beast, and he continued to head towards the guy, .183. In a panic, he continued to press the buttons of the magic item at high speed. But the beast was able to dodge the explosions. At some point, when pressing the button, the magic item stopped working in any way, and at first the guy did not understand why, but after thinking about it, he remembered that the item had a limit. Shoji was about to run, but his leg was caught by a root, causing him to hit the ground. He began to curse how he did it and saw a root sticking out of the ground. The guy grew a root and realized that this was it, and when the enraged beast was almost at its destination, he took 2 magic staffs in his hands. He took 2 magic staffs and used them simultaneously. Then a monster appeared from all the smoke and watched as Shoji diligently pressed the buttons. The monster had already swung its paw at him, but when the guy aimed the magic object, the beast fell back. Shoji looked at the immobilized animal and thought that he had defeated it without using a sword or magic. Main started knocking on the door of the garden and asking if everything was okay with him. He opened the door for Main and said that everything was fine. Main came in worried and said that when she returned, she was worried about the loud noise and asked again if she could come in because the guy had previously told her not to go into the garden. Seeing the charred monster, she realized that it was a forest demon bear that could tear apart metal armor with its 6 arms, and its thick fur could even deflect an axe. A monster that qualified as an A rank. Shoji stood there satisfied, knowing that he had fought such a dangerous guy and had even won. Main asked in surprise about his Shoji-san. He replied that it was because of a magic item he had acquired earlier, which Main didn't know about, and that it used fire magic. The girl was happy that Shoji-san had a magical bear that could defeat the demonic bear. The boy told her that only this item was disposable. She saw the staff that Shoji tried to hide from her behind his back and said that she had seen it somewhere before. The guy tried to change the subject and said how delicious it smelled and offered to try the demonic bear, which was already fried. Main happily agreed because she got hungry while carrying water. The guy was saved, but he didn't know that monsters were edible and didn't think they could eat him. They cut off a piece of meat and roasted it over a fire while sitting opposite each other. A lot has happened to Shoji, and he gradually begins to realize the power he has gained by hiring Sasha. He received the power of magic that could easily kill wandering horses, and the power of a magic item researcher that could create a successful product in the blink of an eye. Thanks to Sasha, from now on there will be a striking expansion of the combat capabilities of security and trade. Main interrupted his thoughts by telling him that monsters usually did not go into the nests of the Great Serpent, their natural enemy, and did not understand why a demonic bear would end up in such a place. The boy thought that if this was usually the case, then if he thought about it, the bear looked like he was crazy. He also remembered the wandering horses that were said to have recently started attacking the village. All this gave the guy a bad feeling of great danger. When Main and Shoji arrived back at the store, they heard someone apologizing and saying that Shoji had suddenly called him. Muda came to them, and when they asked him what had happened, he asked Shoji for iron. At first, the guy didn't understand what kind of iron. Muda asked the boy to get iron for the common good. Then Shoji realized that this was a premonition of a business opportunity. An additional third eye about Sasha's love potion. A girl on a chair holding a bottle of potion in her hand, and Shoji came into her room. It was a few days after he defeated the demon bear on the field and in Sasha's workshop. Today he came to ask if there were any studies on new products, but Sasha drank something and seemed to be feeling unwell. The guy asked what she drank. She said it was a new potion, made from an ancient recipe that she had recently been fortunate enough to acquire. The potion was still in the process of being researched, but it was partially formed, so she decided to give it a try. Shoji wondered if she would be okay because she had drunk, even though she was in the middle of a study, and he felt the research picking up speed. To his surprise, Sasha began to take off her clothes, and when he asked why she was undressing, she replied that she seemed to have made a super strong love potion, and the effect seemed so dangerous that her sanity was fading faster and faster. Shoji became embarrassed and decided to leave the room in that case, but Sasha did not stay and followed him. She pressed herself against him from behind and whispered that the unbearable desire to get closer was an interesting effect, and her heart beat faster and faster. Shoji felt uncomfortable with the feeling of breasts on him. Sasha began to intrigue him with the words that the temperature was rising one after another quickly. The guy wanted to say something, but could not formulate the words. 216. When Shoji said that he could do it, Sasha moved away from him and said that the effect had already passed. The guy said that it was unfortunate that the effect had passed so quickly. Sasha replied that it was so, and that it was a bit funny, and asked him if he would join her during the test. But the guy told her to do everything properly next time. Sasha added file number 3 of the magic item Love Potion to his developments. The potion's effect turned out to be too strong and quickly disappeared, and it was decided to remove it from production by the decision of the store manager. Muda placed an iron scroll on the table and asked Shoji if he could get iron, and a lot of it. Main looked at the piece of iron with interest, and the guy only said that Muda suddenly called him for something. Muda said that he ran away from this country when the shopkeeper told him that he sometimes comes back here, and said that it doesn't matter. First of all, he looked to see that the guy was okay, and that he also had more comrades. Muda picked up a long cigar and continued to talk about how he had previously brought many broken mithril swords with him, and that he wanted to ask him for something. In fact, it turned out that the old man had recently been commissioned to make quite a few weapons, but he lacked iron. The boy asked about why he wanted Shoji to gather iron. The old man confirmed his assumptions and asked if he could do it. Shoji thought about gathering the material that needed his cultivation skill. The old man showed them a wooden box and said that the minimum quantity was 50 of these wooden boxes, and the more, the better. He asked to get it within 2 weeks, and the quality of the iron was as pure as he showed. First, Shoji asked to borrow some samples because he knows nothing about the quality of iron, and will show some originals to a business partner and ask him to check the purity. In fact, he wanted an initial quantity to increase. Muda, without thinking, laid out several samples of iron for him, and the boy asked his second question, He asked why he needed to make a large number of weapons, and why it suddenly became necessary. Muda simply sat silently, lighting a cigarette and not answering him. Everything was still a secret as Shoji thought, and the matter smelled of something. Perhaps it was a medieval worldview, but in modern Japan, this type of client was a nuisance due to the provision of unclear conditions. However, he decides the direction of the store himself, and if he does not like it, he can refuse. Now that the store is open, there is a full staff of sellers and security guards, and a research department is organized. He has entered the arena of business in this wild world. He said he would take on the case and put his hand on his chest. He was interested, and so he accepted the challenge. Muda saw the boys off and, already in Shoji's shop, announced to all the workers to gather. He said that this was their first big deal since Akina's shop opened, and that they should all seize this chance together. The guy said that he could buy a large amount of iron from merchants near the dark forest of destruction, but even if he could buy it cheaply, he would not be able to deliver it due to the distance to the royal capital, and 3 things needed to be organized. The first was a few carts to deliver large quantities of iron. The second was security for the carts, and the third was a city where you could rest during the long journey to the royal capital. Shoji assigned the task of preparing the carts to the team delivering the materials, and they all responded that they would do everything. Regarding the security, he said that Main would be with her, and he was going to entrust the other carts to Sasha, but she got ahead of him and said that she would try to make it more comfortable with the help of protective potions. And regarding the city where they could have a rest, he said that he had already found a suitable city, and so they set off on their journey with the whole team. They arrived in another city, and there they asked for a staging area for Akina's store in their city. Shoji said that they wanted to sell the goods of the Akina store, which were popular even in the royal capital. He understood that they were hesitant to let several strangers in, so he was glad that he had prepared. The city's residents changed their minds and added that, however, their residents were a bit capricious, and they were not sure that they would be able to accommodate them all. Shoji asked them not to worry because their employees were thoroughly trained. Main, who trained them, asked if they were ready under her leadership as the first salesperson, and was sure that they already had the muscles to sell. The staff were very grateful to Main-san for her constant training. Main introduced herself to everyone as a training instructor and told the staff that they had survived her training and were no longer insects, and that they were all useful. She shouted that if they were tired, they should take a day off, in addition to the paid vacation days they received, and that they would be paid a decent salary. The guy used a suitable well-known history of the land and gave her training, which made her popular. After arranging the store's goods, all the employees were serious about selling and were waiting for the order. After Main gave the order to start selling, everyone started doing their job. Residents approached them with various requests and looked at the goods. Some even demanded that they sell something for them. But they were well prepared and therefore were able to provide their goods in full. Soon there was no trace left of the store's goods, and all the kids were very happy that everything was sold out. The residents who let them into the city came up to praise his store and all of its employees. Then Shoji asked about their decision. They gladly accepted the offer to use their city as a staging base for Akina's shop. They also asked them to use it not just once, but again in the future. Shoji was filled with joy and thanked them. Shoji turned to the team and said that he would have to fork out everyone's wages for doing a good job. All that was left was to grow the iron he had gotten from Muda. He had been saving examples of the iron for seeds on purpose. When they transport the collected iron harvest to the royal capital along the route, he will already fit all the ordered hardware to Mood. Muda looked at the perfect pieces of iron and was speechless. He asked him how in just 5 days he had brought even more than he had asked for. He told Shoji that everything was as he had expected, and that he had always known he could do it. Only Shoji knew that, in truth, the production speed of the quote-quote-quote cultivation skill was terrifying, and it continued to increase like a double game. Mada looked at the good iron, which was exactly the same quality of iron as he had asked for, and wondered how he had collected such a quantity, and realized that the method was not important. The old man fell silent, and Shoji asked what happened. He entered the house telling that materials are the life of the forge, and the best dwarf takes materials seriously. Some of them even go to the mines themselves to collect them. The partners they rely on when buying materials are those they trust. Muda asked the boy if he had ever heard of orichalcum. The boy recalled that this was the name of a legendary material in fantasy worlds. The man said that this was an important conversation for a, quote, weapon killer, since it was possible to make a weapon much stronger than a mithril sword, since it was the hardest mineral in the world. Main also listened to him attentively. Orichalcum is only those who work with a large number of mineral materials one day unexpectedly discovered it. It was definitely a mystery. Muda looked at the weapons he had made himself and said that he wanted to forge a superior weapon from Orichalcum someday. Here he said that he would make a mountain of weapons that would rarely break in the hands of a quote, weapon killer. Main asked if this was true. Orichalcum someday, and a lot of it? And he told Shoji that he could trust his back to someone like him, and when he got the Orichalcum, he should definitely let him forge it. Main's eyes were literally shining from the powerful Orichalcum weapon, and seeing this, the guy thought that he would like to find the material for the weapon someday. The guy remembers that he only had one thing left to ask Mood. He went back to him and asked him again why he needed to make so many weapons from so much iron. Why does a master need to make many weapons? Speaking of this, the man had someone he wanted to introduce who had a lot of iron in reserve. He gave him a business card asking them to go to this place, saying that he wanted to assign a job, and that he could accept the assignment after talking to a nice guy. The boys arrived at a large mansion and looked at it with interest. Main said that it was a noble mansion, and Shoji did not want to imagine that he was aiming for his life. They were greeted by a man who was glad they had come. He introduced himself as the owner of the house, Count Safid, Valvarand. He also added that he was just a poor local lord. Shoji didn't care if he was a noble or not, or what he did. He wanted to solve everything quickly and make a big profit. They entered his house and sat in a luxurious room across from the nobleman, who was pleased to meet Akina-kun. He thanked them for coming all the way today. Shoji noticed that he looked like a refined aristocrat. The boy introduced himself as Akina Shoji and introduced Main and Sasha as his guards. The nobleman put his hand on his chin and thought. He looked at them with a keen eye as he approached, which made all the boys feel uneasy. Count Safid lowered his head and, placing his hand on the table, began to rise. He shouted loudly that they were beautiful, and that he would also like to have such beautiful ladies as his guards. The boys were scared and looked at him with horror, and he suggested having a cup of tea when they finished talking about his affairs. He turned to the lady and suggested they have a cup of tea together. At first, they said nothing, but then Main was scared that it was a pickup line. Sasha rolled her eyes and thought it was some kind of new client. The first Main replied that after that, she had work, so it wouldn't work, and Sasha told him that she wouldn't be able to let her client's security through. The nobleman grimaced, saying how sorry he was and that he would not give up easily, and asked, what about tomorrow? One of his servants came up behind him and reminded him that his wife would be angry. Count Safid slammed his hand loudly on the table and said that then we will move on to the main topic of the assignment. Shoji thought to himself, finally thought what kind of assignment this was, and it seemed he did not dare to say a word to his wife. The Count said that he wanted to entrust Shoji with the task of purchasing weapons, and that he also wanted him to purchase a large quantity, not a small amount. The guy noticed that there was a large amount of weapons, as in Mood's order, but why was so much needed? On the paper map, the Count showed and told them that in his territory, Rend, there is a kind of large dungeon. The guy was interested in a dungeon where there are monsters, treasure chests, and bosses, such a dungeon. The Count continued to say that because of this, his territory was overflowing with adventurers every day who came to explore the dungeon, and the valuable materials were also an important industry. Shoji began to understand that the territory itself had become the center of the dungeon. The Count made a serious face and added that signs of a great escape had been noticed in this dungeon. The boy also tensed up when he heard about a great escape. A simple word appeared, which he had not remembered by ear. He told the guy that the great escape is literally a bunch of monsters escaping, mostly monsters that live in the dungeon. They don't leave it. Abnormal reproduction and hunger? It's extremely rare for some reason that a group of monsters comes out of the dungeon. That sounded dangerous, the boy thought. The Count had also said that they usually spotted signs of it and prepared an interception. But they had no time to prepare for this great escape. It arose abnormally, quickly, and on a large scale. They could no longer keep track of all the signs that arose in different places. Shoji assumed that the recent encounter, the escape of mysterious monsters who had lost their minds, was also a sign of a great escape, but weren't they driven out from another territory? Was everything really that dangerous, the guy thought? The Count opened the window and said that the Great Escape was bigger and faster than usual, and at this rate they would not have time to prepare to intercept it. The knightly order, the territory, and the hired mercenaries of Count Safid were not enough. They did not have enough supplies and manufactured weapons. They all stood on the balcony overlooking the city. Count Safid said that they were preparing to evacuate, but were not sure if they would make it in time. But a nobleman stands above all others, so Count Safid is determined to protect the people. When Shoji approached him, the nobleman explained that this was why he ordered a large number of weapons from the blacksmith Mood Kun. And when the Count heard that there was a guy who could prepare a large amount of weapons, he had to test him first by ordering iron. Shoji finally understood everything. The man turned to Shoji-kun to ask if there was a weapon that could be used by a minimum number of people to deal with the Great Escape, and it would need to be purchased in large quantities. Shoji was worried because they had only met today, and he immediately made a reckless order to the merchant and scolded Muda, who had involved him in a dangerous matter. He thought that if this man was ready to pay well for the sake of the people, then he could try to sell it. The guy started looking for the item in his bag and asked what about a disposable magic item. He took out a magic staff from there and said that, moreover, this is an excellent item of lost magic technology. Sasha, seeing her staff, was very surprised and amazed, but the guy reassured her that it was not her staff and that he got it through another channel. Shoji apologized. This disposable magic staff is the main item of their Akina shop. The Count asked how to use this item and, besides, he himself said disposable. The guy explained that by pressing the switch anyone can shoot a fire projectile, and the user's magic power is not consumed when using it. He also added that 6 shots in 3 are enough to kill a demonic bear. According to Shoji's partner, a large number was found in some ruins, and in about 5 days he would be able to get 300 pieces, and the cost for one would be 200 gold. The Count thought about 300 staffs in 5 days, but then his servant ran up to him with trouble. Count Sama asked what was the matter and why it was so noisy. He reported to the Count and the others in a panic that they had received a message and the Great Escape had begun. In 3 days they would reach the defense line, and it was faster than they thought. The subordinate also said that this time a commanding individual had appeared, which shocked the Count. Shoji asked what kind of commanding individual it was. The Count told him that the commander usually does not appear as a strong monster, commander of monsters. It cannot be defeated by guns or magic. He lowered his head and said that the staff is used on monsters, other than the commanding individual. Even if there are too many of them, they would not be able to use them because they have few soldiers, but the staff and the like will not be able to withstand the individual. So he asked Shoji for 500 staffs and a weapon many times more powerful than a staff. He will have to get these 2 things within 3 days and sell them to him, and of course he will pay as much as necessary. Shoji began to think about it and asked Sasha-san to find out if the magic staff was the most powerful magic item they currently had. Sasha replied that it was, unless Shoji-san had another business partner. The boy realized that this was indeed a very reckless request from a nobleman, but 100,000 gold coins for only 500 staffs made him change his mind. This was the largest deal to date. Shoji may not be interested in being an ally of justice who helps people in trouble or being a hero, but he does find it unpleasant to see ordinary people suffer. But the Count looked like a man who would definitely pay, and this was a big deal for Aiken's shop, which had just started operating. In the end, he accepted the assignment. The Count was delighted, and in that case he would lend riding monsters for quick transportation in an advance of 10,000 gold. Shoji thanked him. Upon arrival at the shop, Akina began work. Shoji ordered Oguma and the others to take 30 staffs from the warehouse and send them to the Count. He ordered Sasha-san to guard them, and he told Main to guard him until the office, after which she, together with Sasha-san, guards the staffs being transported. And while the guy himself is growing staffs, he will be able to get a weapon stronger than a staff. He and Main headed back into the dark forest of destruction, where the boy grew more and more staffs. So first he had to deal with the staves. There were only 10 of them available now, and it would take him a day to get the remaining 400 staves from here, so he had 2 days left to grow them. And a weapon stronger than a staff. Must figure out how to do this by growing staffs, but he didn't have time to think. But in any case, first staffs. Shoji had to find the limit of the fastest growth by planting the staffs. It was still early, and he pulled out the staff and held the decoration on the top of the staff in his hand. He threw it away, saying that it was too early again, and decided to take a closer look at the decoration. He had never tried to pull them out before, since with normal farming you only get a small unfinished product, but this one grew from the top, only the top is already completely finished. As he looked at the ball, he thought that perhaps it was something from the story he had recently heard from Moad, the legend of orichalcum, which appears to those who work with large quantities of material. A hint of some legendary material to someone who handled a lot of it, or it just appeared on its own. He didn't know, but that had happened with something other than orichalcum, he thought. In other words, Shoji used the cultivation skill to work in an unusual way with a large amount of material, and he kept thinking, can't he make something new with the cultivation skill? An hour has passed. This is a cultivation skill, not a simple wish. If you plant a thing, many of the same thing will grow. An absurd skill. After digging another specimen, the guy saw that it was ready for the switch. He tied it to a branch and planted this branch at a long distance, and saw something there. 3 days later, the boys met the Count. He reminded them that they were not far from the dungeon of the first line of defense in the Great Escape. They had received a message that several monsters would arrive here today. The subordinate who was on guard shouted that they were already coming. The monsters coming towards them were rank A, 10 demonic bears. The Count thanked Shoji-kun for the 500 staffs and called him amazing, but if possible he did not want to waste the staffs, so he vouched for a weapon stronger than the staff. Then Shoji takes out an unfinished staff from his bag and says that this is it. Everyone asks if this is the item. The guy says that it is his recently acquired weapon, a mana grenade. They rushed to test it in action. The guy threw it to Main and asked her to throw it at them. Main was going to throw it at them. He asked Sasha to cast protective magic when Main threw it, and Sasha did it. And now Main was already swinging to throw the object. She threw it at the bears with great force, and the ball flew straight at the bears. Everyone was waiting for the outcome, and Shoji stood confidently. When the ball reached its target, an explosion began to form. The explosion was so big and powerful that all the guys looked at it with wide eyes. At that moment, there was a terrible noise from the dying demons in this area, but soon it stopped, and only smoke remained. The Count watched as 10 demonic bears were destroyed by flames and couldn't believe it. Main was amazed and praised the guy. Sasha only replied that it was amazing. Shoji once again explained the principle of the new powerful product mana grenade, where you press the button to throw and get an explosion, that's all. He remembered that when he tested it in the dark forest of destruction, perhaps due to the changed shape, a special reaction occurred, and instead of releasing flames, the staff itself exploded. After all, the skill was amazing. The Count was lively and said that it had exceeded all his expectations, and with it they would be able to fight the commander, and asked how much he would sell it for. The guy named the price of the staffs that 1,000 gold coins, and only 200,000 gold coins. The man turned to his cart with gold coins and agreed to buy the weapon from him. The shop workers were happy about this, and Shoji stood quietly and thought that, as expected, the nobles were rich, but he felt that he would get everything he had prepared. One of the Count's subordinates reported to him that the Central Defense Force had arrived. The man ordered them all to move to the center and asked Shoji-kun to explain the goods to the soldiers. Well, here it is, the moment everyone was preparing for. The boys stood ready to meet the Great Escape. Shoji showed the soldiers the principle of controlling a magic item, and the soldiers thanked him for it. In the meantime, the guy asked if he could go and watch their product defeat the Great Escape. The Count said it was good to have someone who knew how to use it. The opportunity to visit the scene of an action of this scale was priceless. Akina's shocked that it was time to sort out the situation. This was the main camp. He said that from the exit from the dungeon, where the demons come out into the city, there is a winding road between the rocks. The line of defense along this road is organized in several stages, and if they go through all this, they will lose. Count Safid showed them the dungeon, saying that these were their enemies, who were more dangerous than usual. The Count's sentry reported that they were coming and that there was an incalculable number of them. Eyes appeared from the dungeon, which looked at them with fury. The guys from the store watched all this, and soon the monsters climbed out of the dungeon and showed themselves. Only their eyes shone in the darkness, and when they came out, beasts and monsters of all kinds appeared. Then Shoji realized that this was the Great Escape. Main was afraid of their numbers, Sasha said that literature had never mentioned such numbers, and Shoji said that it was dangerous. At first, the Count ordered the use of wind magic to open a communication network with each squad. He called Shoji-kun away, which he didn't expect, and started climbing the ladder onto the wooden box. After he climbed up there, he appeared before the large army and asked for everyone's attention, and introduced himself as the Lord of the Rend territory, Safid Valva Rand. In his speech, he talked about whether they had seen the current Great Escape, the rapid emergence and quantity of which were abnormal. The iron weapons entrusted to Modu-kun were only delivered on time in small quantities. The guy tried to understand what he was getting at, and he continued to say that in such a situation, the city, which had become the center of the underground and industry, would burn to the ground. Akina's shop sold him a large number of powerful weapons, and thanks to this, they were ready for victory, and as they all knew, he was married, but when he saw a beautiful woman, he invited her to dinner. After these words, the guys from the store stood there in complete bewilderment. The Count ended his speech by saying that he wanted to get everything he loved, and so he came to increase the population and industry, and at the same time, he was very happy with what he had, and was not going to part with it. The knights loudly supported him, saying that they loved him and would earn him a lot of money and would definitely try to win. The Count also mentioned that he would pay for their efforts, a special reward just for participating in the battle, and the more monsters they kill, the more reward they will receive. He gave his soldiers fighting spirit, and they received enough motivation. Shoji was surprised and thought that this man was a completely different nobleman who does not monopolize profits, is a good comrade, and thinks about how to make money as a team and become a happy team. He was just like the owner, only the things he cared about, and the things Shoji cared about while running the store, were similar, and he had a strange feeling. The Count finally suggested to begin, and his soldiers prepared to attack. Shoji wanted to see everything that Count Rend had. All the soldiers were in their places, and the Count ordered the first operation to begin. The front-line magic staff squad will step forward. They prepared their magic staffs and waited for the order to start firing. After the order, the entire front line attacked the monsters that were in front. The boy couldn't believe they were attacking with staffs. The lookout reported that the first wave of the Great Escape had weakened, turning left and right. The Count said that was good and was delighted. Next came the turn of the ground forces. Their task was to intercept. They cut down the monsters that went to the sides and successfully coped with this. But then came the next wave of monsters, which looked scarier than the first. The boy was amazed that they weakened them with staffs, then changed the route of small groups, and then the soldiers intercepted them. The Count was able to figure out how to use the limited staff, and, as expected, got used to fighting in the dungeon area. The Count continued to give orders to the second and third interception squads. The shop boy thought they could continue like this. A terrible and loud noise began to come from the dungeon, and looking closer, they saw a large, scary monster followed by smaller monsters. The Count and Shoji were scared. The smaller monsters were making loud noises, and all the kids were watching them with interest. Behind these monsters, 3 bulls appeared, walking, scraping the ground. The ground force soldiers tried to attack the bulls, but they were able to dodge them with great speed. No one understood how this was possible. Main said that it was an iron bull, which had a solid body, but the movements had to be slower, and it had exceeded its limits. The lookout also added that there was something behind them in addition. It was impossible because it was a death march. It is a phenomenon where monsters march non-stop until they die, but why did they do that? A giant emerged from the dungeon several times larger than all the others and was behind everyone. Everyone immediately realized that this was the commanding specimen. With his roar, he forced the iron bulls to act beyond their limits and began the death march. The boy realized that the commanding individual was a powerful monster, commanding the other monsters. He had seen this for the first time, namely, how he personally controlled the escape, causing a death march. The lookout showed that at the front of the death march, which had entered through the hole made by the iron bulls, there were residents who had not managed to escape. The Count was very frightened. The lookout assumed they had been out hunting in the woods for a long time and had not received warning. Main was freaking out because one of them had hurt her leg while trying to escape. The Count was asking how that could have happened. In addition, the rapid attack of the iron bulls breaks the soldiers' weapons. They will not be able to prevent the invasion of the death march in several places, and at this rate they will break into the city. The Count was in a great panic and could not spend the grenade's mana to save it for the commanding individual, and said that something could always be done. When the Iron Bull saw the helpless villagers, he took a new target, and the Count shouted that they had to do something right now. He didn't know what to do, and hit himself in the face and talked about how much the power of the commanding individual alone exceeded expectations, and that it was a complete failure. He tormented himself with thoughts that he should do something. Main called Shoji-san. Meanwhile, he looked at the Count and realized that for the first time in this world, he met a nobleman who was trustworthy, because to conduct free business in this world, a good client is needed and there will be no losses from help. And so the guy from the store wanted to help people who had the same ideals as him, so he decided it was time to demonstrate the power of Aiken's store. He gave a signal to Main, who immediately rushed to help the soldiers attack the monsters and save the residents. Main stayed close to the wounded villagers. The knights did not understand what this movement in force was. They were very surprised when they learned that this brave man was the merchant's guard. Shoji turned to Sasha-san and asked if her magic could stop the monsters. She replied that if it was in one place, she could, but she didn't have any effective magic items for several places at once. It was clear that Main didn't have any either. The guy started poking Sasha with magic staffs and said that he wanted her to think about one thing, namely that a magic item changes its capabilities when it is in an unusual state. For example, Shoji said that if it is cut in the middle or the parts are rearranged. He gained this knowledge by opening the mana grenade. Sasha said that she had previously read in literature about lost magic, where something was said. Namely, a magic item or magic power is obtained from the embedded magic stone, but in reality the surrounding parts determine the capabilities of the item. In fact, the power also comes from the parts. And if, for example, he used identical magical objects nearby, the magical power of the parts could interfere with each other and cause a reaction different from the original. It would be something like this, and she created a sparkle around the large combined magic staff. With her improved staff, she aimed at the iron bowls and blocked their path forward. The Count was surprised to see the wall of fire, and the lookout couldn't believe that they had come up with such a method of use right away. Sasha replied that it was thanks to Shoji-san's advice. The iron bowls stopped. The Count ordered that this method of use be communicated to each unit. Now, if the ground forces could finish off the iron bowls, then they had no iron weapons. Shoji replied that everything was fine. He said that Aiken's shop sold iron wholesale, so Maud made the weapons that Aiken's shop delivers on carts. Maud in several carts. Moed stated that it took some time due to the huge quantity, but he had just finished making 2,000 weapons and arrived here. The Count became cheerful again and was very happy to see Maud-kun, and that Aiken's shop helped him with the transportation. Here he saw one guard kick the monsters away. The subordinate said that in an instant the sorceress had invented a new way to use magic items. The mass transportation squad and the manager supervising it. They said that they had changed the situation in an instant, and that Akina's shop did not stop at just selling goods. Shoji replied that it was because they did not want customers to die right after they sold them goods. Main held a large sword in her hand and slashed at the monsters. Sasha, meanwhile, attacked the monsters with magic, and the Count's soldiers continued to attack the monsters as well. From now on, it was time for Akina's special shop maintenance. The soldiers and the Count were so happy that they waved their arms in joy. Shoji stood calmly and decided that they would deal with the small fish first. The girls were still fighting, and then the commander of the monsters stuck his hand out to grab the cave. Everyone was shouting for the commander to come out. The lookout reported to the Count that thanks to everyone from Aiken's shop, the situation had changed. The Count replied that this was excellent. Once they had dealt with the small fish, all that was left was to defeat the commanding individual. The lookout reported that it had already appeared. She had already stuck out both her hands and was trying to climb out, holding on to the cave. Everyone was wondering what it was, and the Count said it was a high-ranking higher troll. Then someone said it was much larger than a normal higher troll, and they thought it was a mutant species. He was the strongest of the troll species. When he had already completely left the dungeon, the soldier said that it was an arch-troll. And the arch-troll is a monster with such regenerative abilities that they are called the catastrophe of an immortal individual. It instantly recovered from light attacks. In the literature, it is said that it withstood the use of ritual magic. Shoji thought that there were so many things that hadn't happened before, and it was strange. But first of all, When he was walking towards the front line, the Count gave the soldiers the order to retreat. The monster struck the ground where the first squad was with his fist. The boys were terrified of him. The Count called him a giant, who had never appeared before like the one who lived in the depths of the dungeon. Main returned to them, and the first thing she asked was if Shoji-san was okay. One of the soldiers reported to the Count that neither the fire staffs nor the iron weapons were effective, so he gave the order to use mines and grenades. Another soldier reported that the rest of the soldiers from the front had already been withdrawn, and mana grenades had been delivered to every location, but they could not even get close to him. They thought they couldn't do anything, but Shoji and his team reminded Count Rand that after-sales service was still ongoing. The guy asked Main if she could throw a mana grenade into the air hard enough to reach the arch-troll. Main picked up the mana grenade and said she probably could. The Count was interested in what was behind her shoulders, and the soldier replied that this was even despite the fact that the two gorges were far from each other. Main clicked the mana grenade, activating it, and swung it hard. She threw the grenade very hard, which shocked the Count. The mana grenade hit the arch-troll, and a huge explosion occurred on us. The explosion was followed by a thick fog that made it impossible to see anything. When the fog cleared, they saw that the troll was burnt, and the guys already thought that they had succeeded. But then a loud, cracking sound appeared on the troll's skin, and the boys could not believe it. The crack widened and eventually covered his entire body. They thought his skin was coming off, but he shed his skin in pieces. The arch-troll came to his senses again, and seeing this, Main did not understand how he managed to survive after receiving a direct hit. The Count was amazed by his life force. He seemed to be mocking them, and quickly approached the place where the soldiers were and waved his hand there. He destroyed everything he saw in his path. The Count panicked. If the mana grenades didn't work, they couldn't do anything, and said that they couldn't let him get any closer, and asked Main-kun to continue throwing grenades. Main quickly threw grenades. Cracks continued to appear on the monster's body. The heroes were very surprised when they saw the cracks. The goblin shed his skin again and continued to smile. Suddenly, his eyes lit up and he smiled. The heroes couldn't believe their eyes. The Count fell to the ground and said that if it was useless, there was nothing more they could do right now. He said that his lands would come to an end. The main character looked at the Count and then silently thought. He realized that he had only come up with one plan, but if it didn't work, the operation would be over. He wondered if he could take that risk. Shoji thought that everything was not like that at all, and now was not the time to doubt. If there is no other plan, he tells everyone that there is a way to defeat this monster. Shoji turns to Main and tells the girl not to waste her manga grenades yet. Everyone was very surprised when they heard from the boy about defeating this monster. Shoji smiled and said that if the attack worked, they would be able to cause so much damage that he would not be able to recover from it immediately. The Count was surprised and stuttered, asking if that was really possible. The young man pointed to the side and said that first of all, the evacuation of the remaining soldiers had to be completed, and he asked his comrades to return all the manga grenades. The knight and the Count agreed. He also shouted for the men to bring Muda. After a while, Muda came riding up on horseback and asked Shoji if it was really his turn to go. Shoji turned to the man and asked if he could make 2 big barrels right now. Muda thought about it and asked again about the barrels. The man asked if the boy really wanted to win. Shoji agreed. The next moment, the man uses his skill to create barrels. The Count is surprised. Muda at this point said that if this was a problem, then the Count can bill Shoji later. He starts building barrels. Muda said he will make material out of it. If he uses the tools and materials he always carries with him. Finally, the barrels were ready. The knight said it was amazing. In a moment, Muda had made magnificent barrels. The Count said he was fascinated by the ability, and then asked what Shoji would do with them. Shoji approached Main and asked her to fill these barrels with grenades. She said that these mana grenades were just the tip. When Shoji was growing mana grenades, he picked them too early and set aside a bad batch. Then he asks the girl to fill the barrels with all of this, including the mana grenades. At the end, she must push the mana grenade switch out and close the lid. Soon, everything was ready. Shoji thought that the method of making it was similar to a hand grenade from the ground. He used up all the mana grenades, so if they failed, it would be over. The girl replied that she understood everything. Shoji used grenades as gunpowder, and the grenade's mana as a fuse. It was simple, but it would be very powerful. The soldier announced and said that all the soldiers had retreated. Shoji said that Main should now throw these barrels at the arch-troll. Main said that it was heavier than the logs she had thrown before, but no problem. She wasn't sure if she could throw it straight enough, though. The young man then turned to Sasha and asked if she could control the barrel's flight with magic. The girl replied that she would make sure that everything hit its target. Shoji also asked the girl to use defensive magic. He then activated the switch and then asked Main to throw those barrels. She picked up 2 barrels at once and threw them to the side with a creaking sound. Everyone was very surprised. She throws these huge barrels that fly straight towards the archtroll. Shoji turned to Sasha. The girl immediately activated the magic seal and used the guide feathers. Suddenly, the barrels were hanging right above the architroll. Everyone was very surprised. The next moment, these barrels explode right next to the troll's head. A huge explosion occurs. Sasha uses defensive magic to protect everyone from the explosion. A huge footprint remained where the troll had stood. The knight announced that the defeat of the commanding individual had been confirmed. Suddenly the count announced to the knights that they could now get rid of the small fry. Everyone rejoiced at the victory. The next day, the action took place in the mansion of Count Renda. Everyone was celebrating. The count announced that they could now drink to Aiken's store. After a while, the count told Shoji that there had been too many unexpected events in this great escape. They had somehow managed to cope thanks to the young man. He then shows a huge number of chests of riches and says that this is gratitude beyond reward, so he asks everyone to accept it. He then turns to the 2 beautiful female guards and Muda, Kun, the shop's comrades Akina and Shoji, and asks if they would like to work for him. Shoji smiles and apologizes. The count sighs and says he understands. He also tells the young man about the next case, that he will give him useful information for his future business. There is a race looking for a capable merchant. Shoji thought about it and asked again. The count explained and said that he meant the beautiful elves. Everyone was very surprised when they heard about the elves. Shoji asked if they would trade with the elven country. The count replied that he could not tell everything here. He would tell the details in his office, but he highly recommended it. Then he said that the reason why he was offering them trade with the elven country was to provide them with a safer and more upward path. First of all, there were many unusual things about the current Great Escape. He investigated the reason for this, and they found that incense that aroused monsters had been placed in various places on the lower levels of the dungeon. Someone had caused the Great Escape on purpose. They don't know who did it or for what purpose. If the one who spread these incense knew about them, he would recognize them as serious enemies, heroes who stopped the Great Escape. If they have no intention of remaining on its territory, then another country is a less likely target for the mastermind of the Great Escape. The elves are looking for a merchant who can deliver large quantities of goods with technologies that their country does not have. He thought they could make a lot of money, so he recommends. In that case, he hopes for the further prosperity of Aiken's shop. They went to the land of the elves. Shoji decided to trade with the country of the elves. The girls agreed and were in a great mood. Muda said that he would then follow him. The man said that he would be the boy's personal blacksmith. Muda was also excited that there were rare items in the land of the elves. If he joins them, they can do something interesting. Suddenly, Sasha asked where they got such a large number of staffs. Muda was surprised and said that he was also interested. Main stopped them and asked them to be quiet. Sasha suggested using contract magic, which serves to preserve an important contract. By concluding a contract magic, you can guarantee the protection of secrets and personal safety. Main was delighted. She said that she wanted to know more about Shoji, so he wants to be more useful to the boy. Shoji realized that he can use everyone's strength this way. Everyone agrees and plans to use contract magic and purchase a contract to keep secrets. The young man was grateful to them. After some time, the contracts were filled. The contract was concluded. Then Sasha asked Shoji why he didn't reveal his secret. Shoji agreed. The young man is asked what his secret is. He answers that his secret base is in the forest. Everyone immediately decided to go there. Shoji shouts after them to wait for him. After some time, they arrive at the house, where everyone learns the secret of the young man's supplies. Shoji opens the door and shows the area where he grows items. Everyone was surprised. The company looked around in amazement at everything that was there. Everyone thought it was crazy. Shoji said it was the power of his cultivation skill. Everyone understood why Shoji didn't reveal his secret to everyone. The young man thought that this secret was too difficult for the others. Sasha and Muda were eager, and then said that many of the items were one of a kind, but Sasha could do any research, and Muda could make weapons and armor. Main said that perhaps through cultivation, Shoji was able to help her cope with her debt, but it was the young man himself who decided to come to her aid. The next day, Shoji woke up Muda. He said that he had come up with a new product using his skill to sell in the elven country. Muda said that he has some connection with the land of elves, so he knows something about them. The country takes care of nature, specializes in medicinal herbs and spices, and maintains a moderate distance from the country of people. As the Count said, they are always on the lookout for technological goods that their country does not have, and when it comes to people, they want what people are good at. So he set his sights on the young man's carriage. In the land of the nature-loving elves, the roads are full of plant roots. It is difficult to move around there. They can modify the cart so that it can easily travel on bad roads. Muda said that he would first make a circular saw and then multiply it so that it could all be mounted on the carriage. Maud was already impatient to put all this into practice, so he told Shoji to get started quickly. Main reminded that in the land of elves, where nature is valued, one cannot cut off roots. In addition, a large number of blades is dangerous for horses. But Muda thought it was a good idea. Shoji thought Muda had simply overlooked these details. Shoji thought the idea of modifying the cart to make it easier to navigate the city's dirt roads was a good one. He decides to use earth technology. He thought that such a cart would be very good. The young man asks the blacksmith if he knows what a suspension is. This is a cushioning mechanism for vehicles used in his homeland. The blacksmith is interested in this mechanism. The next morning, Muda recreated Shoji's mechanism. He was so excited that he recreated the mechanism right away. He had some difficulties with the materials, but the witch helped him. They then modified the cart and decided to take it for a ride. Shoji said it turned out amazing. Then he said that there are other things like that. Muda decides to create a workshop to modify carriages. Shoji decides to plant the finished product. The girl said that men will always be children. Then they spent several days modifying the cart. Shoji was surprised that they finished so quickly. This happened because Muda found a quick way to modify it. Muda was exhausted by the fact that they had recreated the luxurious carriage. The witch said that he simply had not slept all night. She asked Main to move Muda. The next day, huge roots with a bunch of carts came out of the ground. Everyone was surprised. Muda told Shoji that he still underestimated his strength. Thanks to the strength of the young man, Nude will have time to make more carts. Then they decide to test this cart. Everyone was delighted with this design. With the lantern, they were safe even at night. Muda and Shoji were very proud of themselves. Finally, the preparation of goods for sale in the land of the elves is complete. Soon the heroes arrive in the land of the elves. They saw strange roots on the road and did not understand why the roots were bleeding. Half an hour before this, someone shouted after the heroes, but they did not pay attention to it. They continued to praise the cart and noticed a gate ahead. The heroes arrive in the land of the elves. The heroes were amazed by the beauty they saw. Main said that she was very impressed. Shoji remarked that this country was more modern than he had imagined. They would now do business in this country. However, there is a problem with the roots in the ground. They are of different thicknesses, although the surface is definitely bumpy, which has become part of their life. However, when they find out how convenient this cart is, they will buy it. He also noticed that some roots secrete liquid, and some do not. Suddenly, an elf turned to the boys and asked if this was really the first time they had seen this liquid. He offered to try his food, which turned out to be very spicy. The soil has become unusable, and now these contaminants flow out from the roots. The road has always had roots, but only recently, about 5 years ago, liquid began to suddenly flow out of the roots. No one could figure out the cause of the stains. The elf said it didn't affect daily life or water much, but it made food spicy. But the liquid quickly ruined the wheels of the carts. Shoji thought he was okay with food and everything, but it would still be difficult. Suddenly, a girl elf in glasses addressed the young man. The girl told them to follow her. Someone was calling them. They were met by an elf who, it turned out, had been calling them constantly. The man said that he just wanted to ask them a few questions. The elf was Baron Avard Raga Durai. His friends recognized his voice at once. He was amazed at the carriage that could travel on bumpy roads. It moved so smoothly over the uneven road, and the wheels seemed to repel the liquid. In fact, the Baron was tasked with improving the quality of roads in the country, so he became very interested in the cart. Shoji said that this carriage is their new product. It was developed knowing the road conditions of the elf country and brought for sale. The elf asked the guys to show them tomorrow. In fact, there is another store that is going to sell him a cart. He wants both of these carts to compete with each other. He said that the winner would teach their craftsmen the art of making such carts and would be paid for it. Shoji thought it was a good opportunity and agreed. Sasha said that the young man was behaving strangely and then asked if he would help her. The next day they prepared for the competition. Akina's store was opposed by Grigori's store. Shoji once won a lantern sale from them. Grigori decided to tell about his cart. Grigori's shop showed off its new cart with a light and durable body and wood processing technology. Their main point is the shock-absorbing technology with the invented magic item. The wheels are coated with paint, which makes it difficult for liquids to contaminate the road. Shoji says that now they will show their carriage. It is made of mithril, light and strong. The elves thought that such a quantity of mithril would cost them too much. The cart also had a magic lantern. The wheels are equipped with a special shock-absorbing technology called suspension. The wheels are also made of monster material, are elastic, and do not absorb liquid. Suddenly, Sasha interrupted them and said that was not all. She suggested taking a cart ride over the roots. Suddenly, the mechanism that sprayed the roots was triggered, and the liquid disappeared. The girl presented the sprayer technology. Shoji realized that this was Sasha's idea from yesterday. Sasha always carries dozens of potions with her. However, the effect of the drug on plants lasts only a short time. Shoji said that if many spray carts were to travel around the country, it could solve some of the problems. Shoji said that this is a new type of carriage from Aiken's shop. In this competition, Akina's shop was a complete victory. The elf count suggested that they immediately proceed to the contract. After some time, they met Muda. He said that he was learning something new. Sasha asked if the man had anyone from the land of the elves who could examine the liquid flowing from the roots. Muda said that he knew an eccentric sage from the elven forest named Fuyashi. She is a bit strange, so Shoji thought about this sage. A small wooden house, next to which there was another small building. The main character with dark hair was asking for information about a certain Fuyashi, an eccentric sage of the elven forest. Sasha asked if Fuyashi could know about the problem of the elven soil. The old man they were talking to thoughtfully rubbed the ends of his beard with his fingers and answered that it was quite possible. He reported that Fuyashi was an elf. The man had met her one day while gathering materials for blacksmithing. He said that she had mastered the magic of spirits and could communicate with the gifts of the earth. For elves, this was rare. He went on to explain that the elf used her power to study the earth and plants deep in the forest, adding that he did not know more specific details. The dark-haired girl listened attentively and suggested that this elf might well know something that only she knew. The heroine said that she really wanted to meet her, to which the man said that it wasn't that he couldn't meet her, but there were some difficulties. Another girl joined the conversation, who was quite short and very fragile in appearance. The girl said that she also wanted to help the inhabitants of the elf country. The young man standing next to them just watched and said nothing, only opened his mouth in surprise and thought about something. The guy put his fist to his lips and began to think. He assumed that perhaps this was the problem that was bothering everyone, and he would like to expand his business in the future by producing new carriages. And then the young man raised his head and, with eyes full of confidence, said that in order to establish business in this country, they needed to learn more about the problems with the soil. In order to do this, he suggested that they try to go and meet this elf Furia. No one was against it, but on the contrary, they quickly agreed. A huge elven forest, where the trees were located so close to each other that from above one could think that it was one huge plant. The four heroes walked slowly along the path along the forest, and in the capital he broke the silence and said that the elf must live somewhere near the place where they were standing. Then the man began to shout and call the elf by name, wanting to find her, and no one answered his cries. There was complete silence in the forest. The young guy suggested that perhaps no one was home. Then the plants behind them began to move slightly. A tall plant with a huge bud rose up and towered over the four heroes, and they screamed in surprise. The short girl pulled a sword from behind her back and did not understand what was happening. Then the dark-haired girl suggested that it could be magical manipulation of plants. The flower stopped right in front of the four heroes, and they waited. Little by little, the bud began to open, and when it had fully opened its petals, inside it was an elf, somewhat resembling a child. She asked what business they had come to see her for and introduced herself as Furia. She tilted her head slightly to the side and looked rather slyly at the uninvited guests. She turned to Maud and the rest of the people. The three people were surprised the man cleared his throat and said hello, saying how many years and winters had passed since their meeting. And the elf was still sitting in the bud and hanging over the heroes. She asked what business the man came to them with, since he was only interested in blacksmithing, to which the hero replied that they had come to ask her about something else. A tall, dark-haired girl joined the conversation and clarified what exactly they didn't want to talk about: liquids from the roots of the country, and getting only spicy food, about the problems of the soil in the country. She said that if Furyu knew anything, she would be able to tell. The elf became wary and asked why a human needed to know this information. Then the young man gave in and said what was really going on. Furyu was very surprised after the young man's story and exclaimed that the dark-haired heroine had developed a medicine for treating plant roots. For the elf, this was unexpected and impossible. Yes, this girl said that she knew a lot about the lost magic and used this knowledge to cleanse the pollution. But unfortunately, it was a temporary effect. Then the guy continued to speak for her and said that, therefore, in the future, they will use this potion to expand their business. They would like to ask Furia if she knows anything about the soil problem. Bud rose even higher above the heroes. He was in the shadows, and a pair of evil eyes were shining from there. The elf's displeased cry was heard, saying that during her research regarding the soil, she had learned 2 pieces of information, but she would never tell them for nothing. The young man immediately became surprised and asked why Furyu wouldn't tell them about it. She replied that if she told them this information, she could jeopardize important research. The hero asked what kind of research they were talking about. Furyu began to speak menacingly. Her appearance was terrifying. The protagonist was taken aback. But it was not so. The elf told about the research of sweets. Thus her face was so delighted and satisfied that her cheeks were red and hearts were jumping in her eyes. The 4 heroes were simply in shock. Their eyes were wide open and they did not understand anything at all. With her arms outstretched, the elf spoke of sweets. Walking on the flower, the girl explained that she feels relief when her heart needs sweets. They save her. She said that sweets will save the whole world, and they are a symbol of happiness. She rose so high above the ground and with the same cheerful expression on her face loudly declared that she really loved sweets. She stopped and squatted down, saying that she used to just work on extracting all kinds of sweetness from plants, but now her country only grows spicy crops. Now Furyu is desperately researching day and night to fix this. She continued speaking and conveyed to the 4 heroes that their invention for extracting plants could be revolutionary. Standing up again, spreading her legs wider than her shoulders and spreading her arms out to either side, she said that if the heroes fulfilled special conditions, she would provide information. Then she began to dictate the conditions. The elf ordered them to prepare and bring sweets that would make her, who knew everything about sweets, scream and exclaim with pleasure. The heroes continued to stand with their mouths open. The young man even screamed from this. Then the guy asked about, what if they do everything as the elf said, then she will trust them. Then she answered that the one who cooks good sweets cannot be bad. And also she was tired of eating imported sweeteners, which have a rather long shelf life. The guy thought that all the standards are quite sweet, but something bothered him. Then the remaining heroes began to talk about the food in this country. The girl with the blonde hair said that she found the food of this country too spicy, and all the other heroes, the tall, dark-haired girl and the dwarf, readily agreed. The young man came to the conclusion that something like this was necessary for their lives. The protagonist proudly exclaimed that he understood everything, and that Akino's shop would prepare something sweet, which would make the elf beside herself with happiness. They returned to their small house and began to cook. The young man, as the leader, stood near the table, with his hands folded on it. The girls were busy in the kitchen, dressed in cute maid outfits. The young man thought about what sweets could surprise the elf. Then he decided that he should meet with the Baron to discuss the issue of the wagon factory. The elf, with a slightly disheveled mop of hair and holding a cup of hot drink, was surprised when the protagonist mentioned Furia. He asked the heroes what they were talking about, but before he misspoke and called the elf an old woman. The dark-haired young man confirmed everything and said that he wanted to know about the soil problems in this country. Then he would say that it would be great for him. After the words were spoken, the phone guy lied about Furyu's age. The protagonist thought that since the Baron called the elf an old woman, she was older than she seemed. The Baron said that Furyu was very strange and it would be difficult for the heroes to make her talk. Then the hero suddenly said that in the land of elves even tea is spicy, and asked about the availability of milk, but unfortunately the elf gave the hero a negative answer. Their supplies of fresh milk were exhausted. The Baron said that elves always loved dairy products. It helped them neutralize the spiciness of their diet, which was especially fashionable in their days. They drank fresh milk and added it to tea. The young man said that there were several types of processing, into butter, into cheese, into yogurt. Akino thought about all the words elf had said, and decided that he was coming up with something suitable. Riding in the carriage, he smiled proudly and thought that they would show Furyu the full power of his shop. The same elven forest. And the same 4 heroes stood in front of the bud in which Furyu sat calmly. Slyly at the heroes, she said that she had eaten only spicy food today and was already quite tired of it. She ordered the young man to show the sweetness he had brought, the wooden box that was in the hands of the blonde girl and the elf. It contained that very dessert for Furyu. When the box was opened, some white dessert appeared in it. Furyu filled it with white foam, and then she was surprised that the box was cold. And this box was an ice box made by Moad. It was filled with ice that was made with Sasha's ice magic. The elf approached the box where the dessert was. Furyu asked what kind of sweet this was. To this, the hero told that this dessert was called whipped cream. The elf was amazed she did not know about such a dessert. Closing her eyes, the girl began to sniff the delicacy and concluded that it had an indescribably sweet, milky aroma. She crossed out 10 with her spoon and was surprised at how soft the dessert was, like a cloud. She slowly brought the spoon to her mouth and quickly threw the dessert into it. A little later, her eyes widened in delight. Furyu straightened up to her full height and loudly declared that the dessert had instantly melted in her mouth. Her eyes were filled with brilliance, and her cheeks were burning red. She spoke as the dessert melted. In her mouth, there was a soft, sweet, rich, and fresh taste that enveloped her mouth. The pleasure of this wonderful taste passed through the girl's entire body. Sweetness filled the elf's body, and she said that since the heroes had worked so hard all day, she would reciprocate. The heroes watched Furyu with smiles, saying nothing. Furyu was in 7th heaven with happiness and pleasure. Akino's dessert was so delicious. In the world where the protagonist was, there was little dairy production, and the reason for this was that there were no developed technologies for sterilizing bacteria that multiply easily. But the 4 heroes modified Sasha's antidote potion for food and disinfected the milk. Instead of a centrifuge, they used a main, which spun the dessert at high speed. When they took the whipped cream out of the wheel, they put honey in it and frothed it again. The heroes created an imported whipped cream that didn't exist in the world they were in. Furyu flew at Akino with a hug, almost knocking him to the ground on his back, and shouted loudly about the revolutionary sweetness. Both girls, Main and Sasha, did not expect this. Sasha's eyes widened in surprise, and Main blushed deeply. Main ran up to the couple and exclaimed that Furyu should have told them the information they needed. After some time, all the heroes sat down, and the quartet began to listen attentively to what Furyu would tell them. She started the conversation and, raising 2 fingers in the air, seriously said that she knew exactly 2 pieces of information. The elf said that a few years ago, the roots began to secrete liquid, making the food taste spicy, but it seemed that the contamination of the soil itself began much earlier. This information surprised Akino. Holding her index finger in the air, thereby drawing attention to important information, she said that a liquid similar to that which comes out of roots had recently been found in a mine near the forest. The elf said this, emphasizing that it was a rocky place without roots. The 4 heroes were shocked by all the information, and about the possibility of contamination much earlier, and about the liquid without roots. When the hero asked why there was such secrecy in this matter, Furyu replied that it was quite possible that the pollution was artificial, and she did not want to provoke the criminal by raising a fuss. Then the hero asked if it was acceptable for Furyu to tell them this information. She replied that the heroes made her scream the taste of the sweetness they made for her, and now she would be able to watch them up close. The hero did not understand anything from such a statement. Then the elf raised her thumb to her face, thereby pointing it at herself, and said that she would become their comrade. The young man stood up and asked what Furia meant when he said he would become their comrade. The girl smiled sweetly. Sasha also jumped up and said that she wanted to hear more information about the soil that Furyu would provide. The elf toad responded positively and said that it had to do with why she was going to join them. Furyu was the first to say in her argument that there really was a concussion there earlier. Apparently that's what they said. With the help of spirit magic, she communicates with plants and can learn information from them. The girl said that she used her abilities to investigate soil pollution. She communicated with the roots that went deep into the soil of the elven forest. She said that even then, the deepest layers of the earth were contaminated. Furyu said with a very serious expression that the layers of earth in the elven forest, the deeper they were no older than you. Thus, the age of the contaminated layers of earth belonged to distant ancient times. After hearing the information, the elf hinted at how ancient these layers were, and Akina began to think about something. Main asked the elf about what had happened to the nearby mines. Then Furyu answered that from the strata, she became interested in the land itself. She began to study the Rocky Mountains and other areas outside the forests where almost no plants grow. She went on to say that in a nearby mine, now abandoned, Furyu had found a liquid on the surface of the ground that was similar in composition to the contaminated liquid in the roots. Akina had shouted out about a place where there were no roots. The elf began to talk about deep underground pollution, about the pollution of the liquid that was found on the surface of the mine. It was not yet clear how all this was connected, and now she goes out every day to explore the mine. Then the guy asked what this had to do with becoming their comrade. Propping her cheek on her fist, Furyu said that her country once had a rich sweets culture, and she would like to bring it back. She suddenly exclaimed that she couldn't tell the secret of the mail alone, so with the heroes who had developed an unusual carriage, they could solve this problem. She also added that she could eat as much whipped cream as she could, so she had no choice but to follow them. The young man was a little confused, but understood what he was talking about. But he told her not to stop this business in order to eat as much as she could. Then the boy added what benefit it would be for them to have Furyu around as comrades. Closing her eyes and exhaling, the elf smiled proudly. Then she asked, rather asserting, about her ability to talk to plants. The young man did not answer, staring questioningly at the girl. She explained that she had used this power to communicate with the fragrant herbs on whipped cream not long ago. She told what she had heard from the plants. They said that they had been multiplied by some mysterious force, especially for her. She continued to talk about what the plants had told her, saying that the boy could grow anything. She said that this skill was very valuable and incredible. The heroes were very surprised by this outcome of events. The young man tensed up a little, saying that it was a commercial secret and only his comrades could know it. Sasha even added that they were connected by contact magic so as not to let it slip. Furyu said that since this was the case, she was also in a magical contract. That's how much she wanted to be their comrade. Then it began to talk about the benefits of having her on the team. Furyu gave her verdict based on the roles of a quarter of the heroes. Akina was responsible for overall command, Main for the vanguard of security, Sasha for product development, and the old elf for the rear guard of security. The elf added that although the balance was good, the overall strength should be increased. She addressed this statement to Akina, who stood dumbfounded. With her arms spread out to her sides, the girl said loudly that she could be their support. Also, in combination with her strength, her support to cover the weak points of the four heroes' skills was a certain highlight. The young man was surprised at how specifically the elf told everything, but her monologue did not end there, and she added that monsters also live in abandoned mines. Furyu, throwing her eyes and putting her hand on the forms, reported that she supported everyone in the investigation so they could arrange an entrance exam for her. Akina but for her proposal and asked about what the other heroes thought about it. The old man said that he fully approved of the mine examination. The country of the gnomes was close to this mine, and he was interested in learning more about the mysterious liquid. He also added that with her support, he would be able to expand his blacksmithing skills. Sasha said that she was also not against such an outcome of events. According to her, they will be able to solve the mystery of the soil, they will increase the capabilities of the store. Also, the elf can be useful for researching lost magic. In the end, the girl clarified that once they conduct the exam, if necessary, they will hire Furia. For the boys, the last of the four Main spoke up. Beaming with happiness, she said that she had recently been promoted to adventurer due to her recent activities, and she wanted to become even stronger while protecting Akino. She said that if Furyu increased their strength, she would be happy to see it. After her words, the girl blushed very much, and the others began to tease her a little. Putting his fingers to his chin, the young man began to think carefully. Akino really wanted to increase the store's strength to cope with the new business and the unknown struggle. Also, the cultivation skill was a great skill, but it takes a night or so to harvest. It also requires a field or soil to cultivate, which is a sign of a weak point. The boy turned to Furyu again and asked about replenishing the weakness of the vocal hero's skill. Furyu smiled proudly and knitted her eyebrows together, showing her entire attitude. The protagonist also smiled, closing his eyes. Akino exclaimed boldly that he agreed to conduct the entrance exam for the elf. He proudly told everyone to start looking at what Furyu was capable of. Everyone was a little surprised, but they were ready for anything. Mountains that stretched along the horizon. In one of these mountains, there was an opening, the entrance to the mine. 5 heroes stood next to the entrance, and then went inside. The hero walked through a dark room, but this darkness was illuminated by a lantern held in Akino's hands. He looked around and clarified that this was an abandoned mine. The old man said that this mine was once a source of a rare metal, adamantium, but now it was all gone. Then he added that if at least something remained, the hero could forge a stronger weapon for Main. At that moment, the girl cried out in pity. Akino clarified that this was where the mysterious contaminated liquid was. Furyu answered positively, saying that it was a little further away. Suddenly, a multitude of huge ants appeared above the heroes. They hung on the ceiling, right above their heads. The elf immediately exclaimed that they appeared quite quickly. Main also spoke loudly about how these big ants were hard-armored monsters. Akino was a little shocked by this. 3 heroes, Mode, Sasha, and Main, immediately rushed into battle, defeating the enemy. Furyu exclaimed that the 3 fought quite well, but focused more on Main, saying that she was the main fighting force. Main unleashed a huge blast of force on each monster, causing her sword to break. Fortunately, she had more than one. Furyu understood everything while watching the girls battle. She said that she heard about it on the way. It was a weapon killer. As she said before, because of the big ant's armor, which was very strong, a lot of weapons were consumed. Main broke another sword and pulled the next one into the box, but loudly exclaimed that this sword was the last one left in the box. Then Furyu said loudly that since this was the case, she would begin to act. The girl began to read the spell, calling upon the spirits that would connect her with the little life. Immediately, the grass that was in the mine grew in size and became simply gigantic. This greatly surprised all the heroes. The girl loudly shouted to the plants to plow the earth, and they did it quickly and strongly. Mode was surprised that in the blink of an eye, the earth turned into a plowed field. The elf ordered Akino to bury the sword well in the ground. After the work was done, the young man asked the girl if she could now use her cultivation skills. With her eyes closed, the girl said that she could already see how roots began to appear in the ground and of the sword itself. They spread like potato growth and multiplied very quickly. She shouted that this skill was ridiculous. A second later, she waved her hand and shouted the spell of growth acceleration. And swords immediately grew on the ground. There was a huge number of them. Sasha, Mode, and Akino looked at this and were simply shocked. Their mouths and eyes were wide open in surprise. Main ran up to the swords and grabbed one pair and rushed into battle again, blasting the giant ants to pieces. Everyone was amazed at how quickly she destroyed them. Marin said that it was amazing. With this method, she would no longer have to worry about stocking up on large quantities of weapons. To this, Furyu said that it required a lot of concentration from me and could not be used more than once a day. Akino thought that it was very cool and would be very useful for carrying goods. They continued their way through the mine, and Moad asked about the location of the contaminated liquid that Furyu had told them about. The girl replied that she had been to the place where they were before. Some people saw the giant ant again, and were surprised that there were still any of them left. But the young man noticed a distinctive detail. It was not the same ant, because its coloring was different. This ant was red, unlike the others. It moved towards the heroes with lightning speed and cruel intentions. Moad tried to break through it, but he couldn't, because, as he understood, it was harder than the rest of the black ones. Main also tried to hit him, but the ant was even faster. Sasha also couldn't handle him because her magic simply didn't hit him. Furyu told Akino that she would take care of this ant. She said that she would create an opportunity for each of the heroes to make a decisive blow. The elf looked very seriously into the young man's eyes, and he, with his eyebrows drawn together and his hand placed to his mouth, pondered what he had heard. The young man loudly exclaimed that he agreed and ordered Mood and Sasha to cover the attack created by Furyu. The last blow remained on Main. The elf began to cast spells over small blades of grass again, creating them into giant plants. A huge amount of ivy grew around it, which the main character noticed. The elf proudly declared that even if the ants quickly, he would not be able to avoid such a quantity of ivy. And the girl was right. The ant was caught in this plant trap. Continuing to hold him back, she ordered the remaining heroes to start attacking. Each one in turn delivered a powerful blow. And with the last blows of the sword, Main completely smashed the ant. The begging trap collapsed along with the ant, which fell into small pieces. Everyone was shocked again. It was amazing that they were able to defeat this monster. For heroes, it was amazing. The elf straightened up and, putting her hands on her hips, said with a proud face that this was the power of her strongest support. Suddenly, the heroes saw something shiny near the ant's body. Mode and Main came closer to examine it, and a little later, their eyes widened in delight. Stars appeared in the eyes of the two heroes, and well done that this metal was adamantium. He assumed that there was little of it left, and this ant swallowed it. While Mode and Main were examining the metal, the remaining three walked a little closer and noticed some kind of liquid. Sasha asked if this liquid was the same contaminated liquid they were looking for, to which the elf replied positively. The dark-haired girl said that this puddle looked very similar to the dirty liquid, but it was a little different. She didn't even understand why she was in such a place. Having taken out a test tube, the girl said that she would take it with her and try to study this liquid. Having finished with everything in the mine, they headed for the exit. After some time, they were already outside and walking towards the cart. The elf suddenly mentioned how her strength was a hero. The four immediately paid attention to her. Akino turned to his friends, who were smiling admiringly. And then the town boy announced that Furyu had passed the test and welcomed her into his shop. And the girl had such a happy face. Squinting her eye, she said that it was natural, and said that from now on the heroes should take care of her. And then Furyu began to list all the aspects of their care, which included salary, 3 meals a day. She also wished to be paid in whipped cream. The heroes calmly returned to the city in their carts. But halfway through the journey, they met someone familiar. Akino recognized the hero as Baron Dorai, whom he called the Cold Secretary. Dorai jumped out of the carriage and loudly declared that she had finally found the heroes. She immediately rushed towards them. The young man asked the secretary what had happened, to which she plaintively asked that they come to the mansion as soon as possible, and at the end she mentioned the gnomes. Then she said loudly that they wanted the heroes to save the country of the gnomes. She surprised everyone with her statement. The heroes stopped for a while after Furyu's exam was over. The girl was sitting in the carriage and started talking about something, turning to Akino. The elf said that she would have whipped cream for lunch and added that she was now used to the taste because she was a noble elf. The guy prepared everything and said that when the elf ate everything, she would still be impressed. The girl began to make excuses, saying that she would not be impressed at all. Well, as soon as she tried the treat again, she immediately put it in such a taste. The guy said, smiling, that he knew it. Furyu said that it was completely different. She said that she prepared the hearts for sweetness, but still the dessert melted in the mouth and the taste was simply incomparable. And the hero said that in fact this version of whipped cream is a little thicker than the previous one, because less time was spent mixing. The elf was simply delighted. The girl blushed very much and dripped a little cream on her collarbone. Furia was unstoppable. She did not give in to this dessert, praising Akino's cream. The young man blushed slightly and told the girl to get ready, because an elf can't lose the impression of cream. And then he asked if this loss would suit the girl. Licking the dessert off the spoon like a little child, she said that she would never lose. She got very dirty in the dessert. She blushed very much from such unreal sweetness. The other 4 heroes simply stared at the elf, and the young man told her to wipe herself off the sweetness. The sheet of paper containing the recipe for thick double cream was crossed out and instructed that this cream should no longer be given to Fourier. the giant and beautiful mansion of the Ram Dore, to which a carriage drove up at lightning speed. The heroes came out of it together with the elves. Akina clarified what they meant about saving the country of the gnomes. Then, the young man standing nearby said that a messenger had come from the gnomes who was looking for a certain thing. Then, the real Furyu nearby noticed and asked why she was with the heroes. She said that she recognized the abilities of Akino's shop and became their comrade. The elf then said that the elf was known for her eccentricity, to which she responded that the power of whipped cream was simply enormous. The ram said that the gnome who came to them was very tired and therefore was resting in the next room. The door suddenly opened and 2 black figures appeared from it. They climbed towards the heroes, thus greatly surprising them. As soon as the dwarfs stood before them, Mood recognized them as Gaston and Barian. They in turn also recognized Maud, and were pleasantly surprised. One of the dwarves asked why Maud was here, and then asked if everyone here was his comrades. Maud answered positively, saying that it was all a long story, and that he was now working in Akino's shop, whom he introduced to his friends. The one who had been talking to Moad the whole time introduced himself as the dwarf Gaston and was a traveling blacksmith, and added that he was now full of energy. The dwarf with curly hair, who had been silent the whole time, introduced himself as Barian and was Gaston's bodyguard. Gaston said he was glad to meet them all and said he was looking for a merchant. Their tearful journeys brought them to the land of the elves, and then he asked Baron Durai if there was a merchant who could do anything. Maud quickly tried to stop them, telling them to continue without their usual performance. Maud asked the dwarf why they needed a merchant at all, and what was happening in the land of the dwarves, and then he cautiously suggested that a war had begun in their country. Gaston replied that something far more terrible than a war was happening. And then he loudly declared that, in fact, the tall column could break at any moment. Maud was amazed, not believing his friend's words and asking if he was joking. Gaston immediately replied that it was all true. After all, a huge crack had once appeared in a tall column, and to this day it offered to expand. Akino and all the other heroes followed the dialogue, but did not understand what tall column was being discussed. Then Maud explained that the tall column was a huge pillar that supported the gnome country. Their country was underground, and the ceiling was supported by metal pillars. The hero was shocked by this information, and, not believing it, replayed all the moments in his head. Maine interrupted the conversation and began asking more about the crack in the tall column, to which Gaston replied that if nothing was done, it could break and the ceiling would collapse, which is why he was here. It was very dangerous. Gaston explained that for thousands of years, the tall columns had been the support of his country. They still didn't know why the crack had formed in the first place, but the first thing they had to do was repair it. With a heavy look, the dwarf said that the tall column was made of a large amount of the rare metal adamantium, so Gaston was looking for a merchant who was trading. Akino then turned to Maud and asked about the adamantium, since they had recently obtained it from an abandoned mine. Maud responded positively. Maud told that originally there were large deposits of adamantium under his country, so the columns were made of it. Now it was no longer possible to extract it, as well as in other abandoned mines. The dwarf became more and more immersed in thought, and then Gaston said that they specifically needed about 100 of the big carts that were filled with adamantium. He also added that the coachmen also needed to be trained to bring all this stuff to their country. Everyone present was simply shocked by such information. No one expected such a number. Barian also joined in the conversation and said that if they agreed, the price would be 400,000 gold coins. They would be treated as heroes, and the king himself would make preferential trade contracts with them in the future. Gaston lowered his head and, closing his eyes, said that the deadline was as soon as possible. Otherwise, the country of the gnomes would cease to exist. With his fingers on his chin, Akino thought about it carefully. 400,000 gold coins were 4 billion yen on Earth, and the king's connection was also provided. If they agreed, it would be the biggest deal of his life. However, there was one thing. The young man turned to Mood and asked how far the country of the gnomes was from the country of the elves. To which the gnome replied that on the map they were located quite close, but in reality, the country was deep underground, and the road there would take a very long time. Sitting down in a chair, the young man turned to the Baron and said that he had previously accepted the job of transferring the technology of a new type of carriage, but if he agreed to the work of the dwarves, he would leave this job. The Baron immediately waved his hands in denial and said that the country was in danger and he had to help the dwarves. Then the Baron's secretary joined the conversation and said that yesterday in their country there was a torrential rain in the depths of the southern lands, which caused severe damage to crops. The elf, in response to the Baron's objections, said that she would also very much like to help the gnomes with you, but first she needed to sort things out with this country. A new type of wagon that can move fast and handle roots and liquids will be very useful. Also provisions if there is any food involved. They needed those two things. Gaston was shocked by this information, to which the secretary said that the ram stopped her, but she still had to tell. The girl saw that they had provided their coachmen, including those who had headed towards the dwarves. They also needed 100 large carts, which were fully loaded with food. The heroes' eyes popped out of their heads from this information. It was too huge a number. The secretary began to say that they would pay the heroes 300,000 gold coins. But the Baron joined the conversation. He said that it was impossible to prepare so many wagons at once, and the dwarf problem was a threat to destroy the entire country. The last thing he said was that their country would find another solution that would help them. Akina smiled. He turned to his comrades and asked what they thought about this. The heroes only smiled proudly. Sasha said that 100 large adamantium carts were not a problem for the country of the gnomes, because the new type of cart had about the same carrying capacity as the large ones, so they could easily handle 100 carts of the new type. She also added that the problem with the soil in the land of the elves is also an underground problem. If the land of the dwarves is underground, then perhaps there is a key to solving the mystery of pollution there, and they need to prepare for some research. Maine said she wanted to feed the people of the elf country with the nutritious vegetables they sell at Akino's store, and Furyu added that she would treat them with cream to increase her fan base. Mo said he didn't care much about the countries, but if Akino saved him, he would be grateful. Gaston and Baron didn't understand anything. Akino was impatient. These were two big requests at once, and normally it would be impossible to do all of this. But since the hero told everyone about the cultivation skill, he would be able to do it. The hero then proudly declared to the stunned elves and dwarves that his shop accepted both requests. Gaston did not understand how the young man could say hello all at once. Wo was also quite surprised. Then Moad said that if Akino says he can do it, then he really will do it, and ordered them to trust. Baron and Gaston shouted loudly that they were asking for Akino's help. The heroes left the palace with a confident step and set off to prepare. Akino suggested that they start with instructions. He said that Maine and Furyu should expand and strengthen the fields. Mudu ordered to teach the elves how to handle the cart. After all, the new carts will not be understandable to everyone who sees them for the first time. Sasha was assigned to work on improving the tires of the cart, which are made from monster materials. This is necessary so that they are suitable for the native roads of the dwarves and elves. The girl happily accepted the assignment, saying that she would improve everything in accordance with the roads. The dwarves will go downhill, and the elves on the washed out by the rain in the south. The young man proudly shouted to his comrades that they needed to get to work. All this time, everyone was busy with their own work. Maine was in the field, expanding the area. Sasha was in the lab, studying the liquid and working with different bottles. Moad gradually taught the elves to flare up with the carts. Furyu, with the help of her magic, increased the plants, while also expanding the territory. After some time, there was a huge field in front of Akino, and Maine loudly announced that its expansion was complete. Then, the young man, placing a huge piece of adamantium on the ground, said that it needed to be buried and began to do so. And then he asked Furia to start doing what she had shown in the mine. So she said that later the young man would have to feed her cream. She cast a growth acceleration spell, and a huge amount of adamantium grew across a huge area of land. The young man praised the girl for such speed and ordered the adamantium not to stop. Further, in the same way, they will increase the amount of food and new carts. The moon had already risen in the sky, and, entering the house, Akino met Muda, who was sitting at the table and doing something. Maud said what he thought. He should be able to handle the adamantium and take some to make a weapon for little Lady Maine. He said he was almost ready for whatever might happen. The young man thought that Moad couldn't relax unless he did something. Then the hero thought that he would also put in a lot of effort. 5 days later, the heroes gathered again in the Baron's palace. A wonderful view spread out before the two gnomes who had arrived, as well as the Baron and his secretary. There were exactly 100 carts on the street, loaded with adamantium. And on the other side, there were the same number of carts, only now with provisions for the elves. The four were shocked by this. After all, collecting such a quantity in some pathetic 5 days was unrealistic for them. Akina said that the flat was provided as a service, and faster than the standard carriage. They would definitely teach the elves how to make carriages upon their return. Gaston admired how wonderful the carriage was, and the Baron was still amazed at how the heroes were able to prepare so much in such a short time. Gaston and the Baron declared that all these provisions and adamantium supplies would be enough to save everyone. And then, standing proudly before the heroes, they told them to accept their payment, after which they sat down in the carts, and added that they had to leave immediately. All the carts immediately set off. Akina wondered what was happening in the land of the gnomes, but no matter what happened, they would be fine. They proudly and boldly headed straight towards the land of the gnomes. After some time, Shoji arrives with his team in a huge place. He was surprised and said that this was the entrance to the underground kingdom of the gnomes. A huge number of carts with horses were passing this entrance. Main gaped and said it was a large slanted gate. Mode grinned and said it was an underground gate. Shoji thought he was looking at the mine where they fought the giant ants in the land of the elves. He realized, after analyzing the map in his head, that it was indeed very close. Suddenly, some kind of gap appeared at the end of a stone tunnel of arches, into which a huge number of carts were moving. Shoji realized that they were indeed going underground. He turned to Maud and asked why the dwarf country was underground. If they lived well there, then they should be fine on the ground too. Muda replied that they originally lived on the ground as well. However, after one incident, they went underground and found a large vein of ore, which was very convenient for them, blacksmiths by profession. When they dug down to the vein, they found a huge cavity, and then the king of the dwarves made the huge cavity a home for them, the dwarves, and founded the first city. Shoji thought that this was a truly amazing story. Suddenly, the male coachman turned to Muda and asked if this was really just the beginning. Muda smiled and agreed, then asked if he hadn't noticed from the beginning. Shoji was surprised when he realized that the tunnel was bright, but there were no torches or lights. Muda agreed with him and said that they were growing glow moss on the way to the underground kingdom. He asked Shoji if he could really see well. Shoji thought it was some kind of glowing paint on the ground. He realized that it was convenient for a fantasy world. Suddenly, they were interrupted by Main, who pointed to the side and asked Shoji to look there. They saw huge glowing columns decorated with beautiful paintings. Shoji said it was just amazing. Main also added that it was very beautiful. Sasha said that these were columns made of mithril. She also added that the relief on them was simply amazing. Main replied that the mithril had a very beautiful color. It was a completely different color than her mithril sword. Muda said that these pillars were a greeting to their country. They made them with special care so that they would not be underestimated. Shoji realized that the technology of the dwarves was simply amazing. He said that the walls were also smooth, and there was some kind of wall painting on them. Muda replied that the wall depicted the myth of the founding of the dwarf kingdom. Shoji asked the man about the myth. The coachman said that they had gone underground. It was a story from the distant past, when the world was a wild and harsh place. At that time, the world was a hell on earth with ferocious monsters everywhere. One race built walls and hid behind them. Another race hid in the forest, and another race fled underground. Muda said that it was believed that his dwarf ancestors had taken refuge underground. Main added that it had been very difficult for them. Muda agreed and asked them all to look at the wall painting. Everyone was surprised. He said that this was how his ancestors created a safe country. The underground gates were also intentionally built at an angle so that they could not be easily opened by approaching monsters. Sasha said that it was difficult to open a corner gate. Shoji added that, however, myths and legends are always mixed with interesting creations of people of later times. He wonders whether such things really happened long ago. Muda said that no one knows. It is a story that happened many generations ago, although it would not be a myth if anyone remembered the distant past. Sasha said that according to research, traces of a large number of monsters that lived long ago have been discovered all over the world. Scientists agree that it was some kind of great dungeon breakout. Shoji thought that, of course, if something like that happened all over the world, they would have a similar situation. Other dwarves said that their dwarven ancestors fled underground. This tunnel is a tribute to their ancestors, who risked their lives to give their descendants a better tomorrow. It is the result of the tears of the engineers of that era who dedicated all their efforts to repairing it. Shoji thought that every time they found a part that needed repair, they updated it with new technology, and the result was this magnificent tunnel. Finally, Muda said that they were almost to the kingdom. He grinned as a huge white light appeared. Muda said that this was their gnome country when they all came out of the tunnel. Everyone was very surprised. May nearly fell out of the carriage when she was surprised by the sight of this country. She added that the country was much larger than she expected, although they were underground, but it was very light here. Shoji was also surprised by the sight of the dwarf country. Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted by Muda, who was pointing at a mechanism in the distance. He said it was a tall, adamantine column that supported the kingdom. Suddenly, Shoji noticed a crack in the once majestic tall column. Shoji asked Muda if they could fix it with the prepared adamantite. The man replied that they would insert adamantite into these cracks, or rather, it could be melted and poured. This time, it seems the dwarves are using the reinforcement method. Shoji asks if it will be all right with such a crude method. Muda says that he is just giving the boy a general description and the method itself is a trade secret. Shoji mentally agrees with the man. The Baron announced that a place for the materials had been found and their men would unload the luggage, but Shoji's group must remain here. Shoji thought for a moment and then said that it was a masterpiece. Main agreed with him and said that they had arrived at a place that was too amazing. Suddenly, one of the dwarves turned to Shoji and apologized for disturbing him so early. The man informed him that their most senior master wanted to see the young man. Shoji mentally asked again. After some time, the man with the crown on his head called Shoji's group brave merchants and thanked them for coming to the aid of his country. He said his name was Mirdo Yugelis Deus. Shoji turned to Muda, and the man said that Mirdo was His Majesty the king of their country. Shoji realized that he had thought correctly, but then he wondered why the king would be here. Shoji bowed and said that his name was Akina Shoji and that he was a traveling merchant. The man said that Shoji did not have to address him so formally, since the boys had helped him a lot. He looked at the huge boxes of ore and said that it was wonderful that the young man had obtained such a quantity of adamantite in such a short time. Shoji thought that this time the amount he had brought would probably be enough to somehow cope with the country's crisis. The man allowed Shoji. He also said that in recognition of the great work of Aiken's store, he had prepared a thank you note in addition to the money. He announces on behalf of Mirdo Yugelis Deus that Akina Shoji is being promoted to the rank of Underground Gate Chief. Shoji asked Muda what the title of Underground Gate Chief meant. Muda said that it was equivalent to a count in human nobility. Shoji realized that he had received the title of count. The dwarf said that the king was also the best craftsman in the country. He had found a weak spot in the support of this large cavity, and almost single-handedly built 2 more columns. To receive the title of chief from the king was very cool. Main also said that it was very cool. Sasha smiled and added that Shoji was now a noble. Now the girls in town wouldn't leave him alone. The elf added that it wasn't enough for the whipped cream maker. Shoji thought that he was a noble. With the title of a noble, he would be able to benefit himself even more. Suddenly, he realized something. Shoji said that he was very grateful for the king's kind offer, but he had to refuse. The king was very surprised. Shoji said he didn't think he could do business freely if he had a position. Muda asked Shoji to stop. Suddenly, the king laughed. He said that it was true. He too had thought many times that he wanted to stop being king because he could not be a blacksmith as much as he liked. He agrees and says that he understands. Then he decides not to give the boy the rank of an official, so he says that he will think of something else. Shoji thanks the man. He thought that the obligations of the nobility are very tiresome. Main said that it was a loss for Shoji. Sasha agreed. The elf added that if he were to pass on the title, it would be the king's position. Muda replied that he would say that he didn't need the title either. Shoji thought that, in any case, this was the end of this request. There were no serious problems. The king said that they had prepared a place to stay for Akina's shop, so they could rest a little first. There are also delicious dishes made from root vegetables. The other gnomes asked the boys to tell them stories about the land. The girls were delighted and asked if they had anything sweet. So they set off. Shoji turns around, and behind him is a great pillar with a huge crack. Suddenly, something starts to flow out of this crack. The next day, early in the morning, the dwarves thanked the young man for the funny story the night before. They asked Akina's shop to come again. Muda said that the elf coachman left first, so they were going back. Shoji asked Muda if he would stay. Muda said that they had brought the adamantite, so there was nothing more they could do. Suddenly, Shoji was called by the king. Shoji asked what had happened. The king struggled to find the words. Then Shoji interrupted him and asked if there really was a mysterious liquid dripping from a crack in the tall column. The king agreed and said that in this regard he would like to talk to the young man, but for now he should just look. After a while they come to a hut, inside of which there is some liquid. The male dwarf said that the morning patrol found a strange smelling liquid in the barn, investigating a crack in a high column on the floor. Sasha was surprised and asked if it was really on the floor and not on the ceiling. The king said that the roof of the barn was melted and dripping. Shoji thought that this liquid smelled strange. It was dissolving. It could be an acidic liquid. The girls looked at the liquid. Sasha said it looked like the liquid they found in the mine in the land of the elves. Shoji thought that all they knew so far about the mysterious pollution in the elf country was that pollution had been found in ancient geological strata, and a similar liquid had been found in a mine in the elf country. But there was a similar liquid in the dwarf country as well. Sasha whispered and said that this was something she would like to explore a little. Shoji apologized and said that they could allow a little research on these two. They are extremely excellent scientists of humans and elves. The king agreed and said that he understood. He would lend the two of them their basic research department to study the matter. Shoji thanked him. Then the king said that about why he delayed them. Perhaps in the future they will need more adamantite for repairs. Shoji was surprised. The man said the crack only appeared about 7 days ago. It was in the middle of the night, and suddenly there was a loud noise, and then this happened. As for the cause, there is an opinion that it may be due to the recent small tremors that have appeared. They do not know yet, and they cannot investigate further without cutting the large column. However, this morning they learned something new. If the liquid is leaking, it means there is a small hole in it. Main asks Shoji if everything is okay. It's just a small hole, so there's no problem with durability. Therefore, if there is not enough adamantite in an unforeseen situation, it is unclear what to do. Shoji thought that the crack and the small hole, as well as the mysterious liquid similar to the one in the elf mine. He wonders if there is something in the tall column. Suddenly, a noise was heard throughout the dwarf country. Everyone was surprised. Shoji asked what it was, to which Main replied that it was shaking. Then the shaking stopped, but Main was surprised that it stopped so suddenly. Shoji said that these tremors had started recently. Muda said that there had been no such tremors before. The king agreed and said that most people recently said that the crack was caused by tremors. The king told the boys not to worry. Such a tremor would not be enough to destroy the Great Pillar, because they continue to protect the crystal of the best crafting techniques from generation to generation. Shoji thought of Muda. Shoji said they would go to the research hotel for now. Main replied that she wanted to see how Sasha and Furyu were doing. The king agreed and realized that it was the right idea. After some time, the group comes to Sasha with Furyu. Shoji asked if the girls were okay. They agreed. Sasha said that she wanted the boy to hear what they learned about the liquid. The boy realized that for these two, this was a normal thing. Sasha said that, first of all, this liquid, which is said to have dripped from a high column, it is very similar in composition to the liquid in the elven mine. Just because they are very similar means that they are slightly different. The liquid from the high column is more acidic. The liquid from the shaft is less acidic. The elf added that the liquid polluting the elven land is close to both liquids. This one is also slightly different. Simply put, all three are similar, but all three are different. Shoji thought that they had unexpectedly learned something about the soil problem in the elven country, and for now they would leave these two alone as long as the king allowed them. Muda decided that he would go and explore the city. Shoji agreed and said that he would go too. Shoji asked where they were going. Muda answered insignificantly. After some time, they come to the dwarves. The dwarves are happy when they see them. Muda chuckled and told Shoji that he had made a lot of friends in the city. Shoji said that yesterday at the inn he was telling them about his business on the land and all that. They were very excited and seemed to like him. Shoji said that all the inhabitants are artisans. Muda agreed and said that their task is to continue to put in order this city that was left to them by their ancestors. The young dwarf agreed and said that he was going to become one of these craftsmen. Then Muda turned to Shoji and told him to move on. After a while, they come to the right place. Shoji asks if this is really where it is. Muda said that this was his house before. He said that it is true. The creations that remain in this country and this country are beautiful. He points to the young man and says that he will become a good craftsman in this country. All the craftsmen of this country love and believe in the old things of this country. They find the meaning of life in protecting and repairing all of this. They are all amazing craftsmen. However, when he was that age, he said he wanted to do something new. That's what he thought. So he left the country and cleared out the house. On the other hand, it's like leaving your country. The man came here to see the unchanging king and country. He thought about the differences between him and the other dwarven craftsmen. The other craftsmen continued to protect this country. He had never done anything for this country before. This means that he has no right to defend this country. He does not understand how this happened. Shoji turned to Maud and said that he also prepared for coming here and many other things. Muda said that without Shoji's power to grow adamantite, nothing would have worked. For saving this country, really. He thanked the young man for that. Muda turned around and said that it was time to return to the inn. It would take time to examine the girls. In addition, because of the king's story, they would also stay today. He did not want to work overtime. He would not do anything else. It was already late at night when the lights in the city went out. Shoji thought that at night the lights go out and it becomes dark. It was like that even yesterday. The dwarves continue to stubbornly protect the soul of the craftsman and the amazing techniques of the past. Maud said that he chose a different path, but in the end it is also the path of the craftsman. Like everyone else in this country, so it's not like he doesn't have the right to defend this country, but Muda keeps dragging the past. True, he is also a stubborn craftsman of this country. Suddenly, the earth began to shake again. Shoji ran out of the room and said that the shaking was bigger than before. Muda did not understand what this meant, and ran into the street. He wondered if the column was okay. They began to run towards the column, but suddenly became frozen with horror. A huge ant monster burst out of the column. Shoji thought that it was a huge ant, many times bigger than the big ants from the mine. It was much bigger than the Architroll during the Great Escape. It came out from a tall column, was the mysterious liquid and the earthquake because of it. Muda recognized the animal and said that it was impossible because it was an Iron Eater. Shoji asked about the Iron Eater. The next moment, a hail of arrows rained down on the huge ant, but it paid no attention to them. Muda said that they were warriors of the kingdom. Shoji realized that the arrows did not penetrate the shell of this ant. Muda replied that such a bow would not be effective against its body. Someone shouted for everyone to retreat. Muda replied that it was a white, hard body. It was definitely a white, hard body. This monster was definitely an Iron Eater. Shoji asked if an Iron Eater was such a dangerous monster. Muda replied that it was a legendary monster that destroyed mines and ate all metals. Shoji was surprised when Muda said that this monster ate metal. Shoji thought that the white ants of the earth eat wood, and the white ants of another world eat metal. Indeed, metal is the material from which all tools are made. If he eats this, he is terrifying. Muda said that Iron Eaters were found in different parts of the world and were not considered to be such dangerous monsters, but when it was discovered that Iron Eaters were devouring ore in mines, countries finally realized the danger. And they say that he was recognized as an enemy throughout the world and destroyed after a fierce battle. The exact period of that war and the content are unknown, but they were definitely exterminated. Shoji thought that the monsters that were supposed to be destroyed were still alive. It seemed like they were in a pretty tough situation. The dwarven warriors continued to attack the monster, which was hiding in the crevices of the column. They were very surprised. Suddenly, Shoji thought that the monster had gone away, but then the tremors started again. This means that the monster is coming out again. Suddenly, a huge amount of debris rained down. Main and Sasha used their abilities to protect themselves from the debris. Shoji asked why they didn't all evacuate to the surface. The Iron Eater was eating a tall pillar from the inside. At this rate, the pillar would break and the ceiling would collapse. Main said she didn't think the country would survive the next one. The gnome's cries were heard that they had to try to fix everything before he got out of the crevice again. At that moment, Muda noticed a small gnome trying to fix his house. He was frozen with horror. Shoji said that even in times like these, repairing the country is a priority. Muda replied that this is a country where the pride of a craftsman is more important than his life, where he is willing to give it up. At that moment, huge debris fell right on the place where the little gnome was building a house. Muda was frightened, and then he clenched his teeth. At that moment, the little gnome noticed the falling debris. Suddenly, Muda covered the little dwarf by catching a huge piece of rock. Shoji was scared, and Muda's hands began to shake at that moment. Muda pulled out and shouted, lifting the stone. At that moment, Shoji shouted, "Main!" The girl picked up the stone and threw it straight towards the stone that Muda was holding. The stones hit each other and flew away. Shoji called Sasha. The girl agreed, then stretched out her hands and said that it was better to curry favor with this country so that they could continue to use the lab. She summoned a huge number of magical seals to protect Muda and the little dwarf. Shoji shouted and called Furia. The girl was happy and said more whipped cream for the snack. The girl grabbed the falling debris and held it in the air. Muda called the boys and was stunned. Shoji said that overtime was something they liked and didn't want to do, but sometimes he thinks that it can be done if the employees want it. Muda was surprised. Shoji thought about the Iron Eater, his business partner, to destroy Muda's country. If he was going to do it, he had to do it. Shoji ordered him to get out, since he would be getting overtime super service from Aiken's store. Shoji said that they would help their important business partner, the dwarf country. Of course, he would pay them a lot of overtime. Main agreed. Shoji said the first thing to do was to assess the situation, but the residents refused to run to protect the city. The tall column that supports the country is on the verge of collapse, and the Devourer can come out of the tall column again at any moment and attack. Many warriors were wounded while defending their country. Weapons and bows are ineffective. Shoji said that was pretty bad. They had to deal with the wounded first. Shoji called Sasha and asked the girl if she had taken any healing potions. Sasha showed a jar and said that she had taken some potions. Shoji suggested using wood chips and making a simplified shutter for the growing field. Then Shoji called Furia. The elf used the growth acceleration skill. Then many potions appeared. Shoji said that was great and they would pass it on to the warriors. Now they had to somehow evacuate the stubborn villagers. Main replied that it was too dangerous to fight if there were any villagers left. Muda thought about it. Shoji turned to the man. Muda turned to Miss Sasha and asked if she could magically transmit her voice to the entire country. The girl agreed. She used her magic. Muda began to speak and asked the people to listen to him. Everyone turned their attention to the man and said that he had left the country. Muda turned to the people and asked if they could evacuate temporarily. He suddenly says such things, so they cannot believe him. He left this country because he wanted to create something new. But when he came back to this country, they all continued to defend their work. To create something, to love what they realized, because he thinks that his roots and everyone else's are the same. So now he understands why the dwarves don't want to leave their country and evacuate. But he is confident that those of them who have a heart and the ability to care for their country will be able to cope with whatever happens. Muda gets angry and says that he doesn't know how to say it, but they have to run anyway. Shoji and Main were surprised by Shoji's speech. Then suddenly the king appeared and told Muda to let him speak. The man said that he was the king of the Myrdo dwarves. From now on, all the dwarves except the soldiers would follow Muda's orders. He announced the start of the evacuation to the surface. Muda was touched that the king supported his idea. Myrdo said that no matter how traditions fade and are destroyed, as long as the country and its people survive, they will restore them again. They are the dwarven craftsmen. That is the essence of it. The king ordered everyone to start evacuating. If they could, they were to form a team. If not, they were to flee alone. Their goal was the surface. Soon, all the dwarves began to evacuate. At this time, Shoji showed the soldiers a box of potions. The dwarves were happy that so many potions, and of such good quality, were prepared. They thanked Shoji and said that with this, they would be able to fight for a while longer. The king thanked Aiken's shop and then said that now there was an Iron Eater left. At that moment, a crash was heard. The king of the gnomes tensed up and said that the monster was coming out. The next moment, a huge ant appeared right next to the great column. The king said that they would defeat it. Everyone was surprised that the ant appeared from a place other than the tall column. The ant moved freely underground. The king said that the monster had dug holes underground all over the country, not just in the tall pillar. Shoji was scared and thought, do they really want the whole country to be an ant's nest? The recent earthquakes were vibrations from his movement underground. The king said he could easily escape through the holes and bows were ineffective. The king didn't know how to attack him. Shoji thought that powerful magic, or a mana grenade, could bring down the weakened column or the entire country afterwards, and they didn't bring a mana grenade with them. If possible, a pinpoint attack. The king said that he would not allow the monster to run amok. He called the captain and ordered him to bring out a new structure. Suddenly a ballista appeared. Shoji said it was an absurdly large bow. The king said it was the most powerful, mass-produced weapon in their country. A large mechanical bow capable of firing a series of large stakes. Shoji realized that instead of blowing things up, he could use a pinpoint attack and cause less damage. The king said that if it did not work, his country would be destroyed. The knight captain said that they would definitely defeat him. The craftsmen of weapons put their skill into this mechanical bow. The captain shouted that their army was the strongest, and then announced fire. Huge arrows rained down directly into the body of the giant ant. The king was glad that the scheme worked. Iron eaters have no sense of pain. They are destroyed by a large number of attacks. Shoji was surprised that ants have no sense of pain. The king wanted to say that at this rate, they will succeed. At this moment, the ant spits out a huge amount of liquid. The man asked if this was the same liquid that was dripping from the high column. He realized that it was the ant's liquid. With this liquid, the ant was able to dissolve the earth. Then, when the layers of earth became soft, the ant began to dig. At this point, the ant went underground again. The king said that if he escaped, he would destroy the country again whenever he wanted. This was their last chance. He ordered that all the stakes attached to them be fired, and that he should not be allowed to escape at any cost. The arrows with ropes started to stick into the ant's body. The king said that it was excellent, and they should shoot and pull at the same time. Shoji was surprised by the stone bow. The warrior men began to descend towards the ant. Shoji thought it was reckless. Suddenly, an ant appeared right on their perch and threw back a mechanical bow. The man said that a few stakes remained, but the mechanical bow was destroyed. There was no more weapon against this monster. It passes through the earth. It is elusive. At this rate, the whole country will be full of holes, and he does not even flinch because he has no sense of pain. The damage itself has already been done. Just a little bit more, but should they gather the mages and cast a big spell without caring about the damage to the area, it will eventually destroy the country. And they don't have enough mages in the country to defeat him. The king could not believe what he had to do. The elf said that with her spirit magic she could stop it, but the scale would cause the city to collapse. Sasha said that with all the magic and magical items she had now, she couldn't either. Shoji thought that pinpoint attacks with stakes were the best in this place after all. At that moment, Main told Shoji that this was her turn. It would be hard for her to defeat him from scratch alone, but now that the dwarves have worn him down, she thinks she can. Shoji said there was no weapon against him. Main said there was a weapon, then pointed to the wooden stakes. Shoji thought Main's skill was superhuman. Shoji thought about it, then agreed with Main and asked her to begin. Main agreed. At that moment, Main interrupted Muda and said that there was something he wanted the girl to wear. After a while, the girl was dressed in armor. He said that he had been working on this adamantine armor for the girl before he came to this country. He said that this armor greatly increased defense. The spring and suspension technology used in the carriages helped the body move. Main said that was great. Shoji thought that it was like a power suit. The elf said that this hard exterior made it easier to move. Muda and Main made a battle click and began to smile. Shoji called Sasha and asked the girl if she had any poisons that were effective against the Iron Eater. Sasha said that if so, she could combine a pest control potion with a sap neutralization potion from the elf country. She asked, how about a poison that would damage and prevent escape into the ground with body fluids? Shoji thought that might work. Main said that she did it in a flash, as expected of Sasha. Shoji approached Furyu and told the girl that they would help with the cultivation. He asked Muda to have the man put poison on the tip of the stake and help Main. Shoji announced that the operation was beginning. He thought that, however, the cultivation had to be hidden from the king and others. Muda turned to the king and said that they would go and see if there were any other weapons up there. The king agreed. Shoji thought about it, saying this in the recent made inside the shutters. They bury the collected stakes, and then use the cultivation skill. Hiryu accelerates growth and completes. Shoji is happy and says that everything is ready. Then the huge monster finally came out. Muda reported to Shoji that he had smeared poison on the spears. Shoji called Muda and ordered Main to begin the operation. The girl agreed and raised the huge spear. The next moment, Main throws the spear. It hits the ant's body. The next moment, Main throws as many spears as possible. The commander of the Dwarf Knights was surprised and said that there should have been only a few stakes left. The king replied that this simply could not be. He also added that this girl throws stakes into flesh with more force than a mechanical bow. They were surprised by her strength. Main said that this armor definitely makes it easier to move. He can gain strength more easily than before. Then the monster started spitting liquid. Shoji thought it was going to run underground again. Suddenly, the king was surprised that the earth did not dissolve. Shoji thought that Sasha's poison had worked. The monster's movements were also weakening. Finally, they all tensed up and thought that this was their chance. Main at that moment took the spear and shouted at the monster that he would not leave. At that moment, she threw the spear at the monster. The king and the captain of the knights were tense and shouted for them to act. Main prepared to throw the last spear. She screamed and used her power to throw the spear. The spear pierced the monster's head, putting an end to his life. The monster weakened and then breathed its last. Everyone was glad that the Iron Eater had completely fallen silent. The king said that they had defeated him. The Iron Eaters had been exterminated once, but it was unclear why a living one had appeared. Sasha said that he also had liquid dripping from a high column, also most likely from the Iron Eaters. The elf asked about the connection with the liquid from the elven land, the composition of which was similar to that of this liquid. Shoji suddenly heard something, and then they noticed a huge great pillar that had collapsed and was starting to fall. Everyone was very surprised.